Good evening, everybody. Welcome to, I think I jokingly called this my TED Talk, except it's going to be two of us talking about this. We are going to be talking today in this little pseudo podcast, I guess is what we're going to call it. But this episode, we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about Dragonflight tanks. 3 of these 6 tank specs have been released for talent trees so far. So we're going to be talking about those, going over each one, talking about just kind of tanking in general. I am not alone in this podcast, though. I am joined by my current / soon to be former raid leader and tank cohort in the iconic raid team, Brewseph. How are you doing tonight, Brew?
I am doing quite well. I'm very excited to be here chatting about tanks with you tonight.
Yeah, it's something I think you and I have kind of mentioned in the past before. We just finally never got around to it, and then I finally was just like, hey, why don't we do this?
Yeah, and doing stuff in this format is something I miss a lot. Still am part of Pwnecast. It's been on hiatus for probably going on 2 years now, but joining them at probably halfway through BFA and doing this format of content is something I'm very comfortable with, and it's something I miss a lot. And I'm very excited to talk tanks and theory craft and go through these new talent trees with someone who is just as passionate as I am, if not more passionate.
Which is really weird because I only started tanking in BFA when I came back to the game. Like, I was a DPS player, a Moonkin in particular. So just a quick overview. We'll do just quick overviews of us for anyone that isn't familiar with our histories in World of Warcraft. I'll start. I started off playing in vanilla in 2005. I wasn't like a day one player, but I was like shortly after graduating high school. That's how old I am. I graduated high school when WoW came out. And I started off playing Rogue, joined a guild, didn't know what I was doing, learned how to play Rogue. Eventually, in Burning Crusade, switched to Moonkin Druid, which was unheard of back then. One day I might do a video on my switch from Rogue to Moonkin back in those days, because it's kind of wild. Wrote the Moonkin guide in Wrath of the Lich King. WoW hadn't taken off in the way that it did, so you wrote that guide on the forums. It's really bad. I'm sure you can go find an archived version of it somewhere on the internet, but it's awful. So I don't recommend it. And because of that, my brother likes to joke that I am the progenitor of the current Moonkin community. I helped create the monster that we have today. So, but after Wrath of the Lich King, I left the game for financial and technological limitation reasons and didn't come back to it until patch 8.0.5 in BFA, where I think I had a very different view of that expansion because I missed, the golden era of class play and MOP and to a lesser extent Legion. And came back and decided I wanted to do a role that I'd never done, and so tanking became the thing, and I played all 6 tanks trying to find the one that I landed on, and it took until 8.3 when I finally gave Monk the old college try and then loved it. And so I've been maining Monk ever since then, and now I'm trying to play all 3 specs. And for Dragonflight, I'm actually still considering Monk, but I'm also considering Paladin and Druid, so 2 of these tank trees have great interest to me. So that's my history in a nutshell. What about you, Brew?
So for me, I started playing back at the tail end of Burning Crusade. It started just at the start of my junior year of high school. So that was August of 2008, and it was Labor Day weekend. And one of my cousins who plays WoW and a girl I was dating at the time, both were like, "Hey, it's a long weekend. We're going to be playing. You should give this a shot." And I did. I made a Blood Elf Paladin, and basically have just been, hooked ever since. Leveling through Burning Crusade and everything. I played Protection Paladin. The girl I was dating, she played a Holy Paladin. And then I didn't really do any high-end content until Legion, where some of our friends that we're running keys with now, I've started getting into Warcraft Twitter, and someone tweeted, "Hey, my friends are putting a guild together. They're looking to do heroic, get AOTC. We're looking for people to play the game with." And so I reached out, and they already had 2 tanks, and so I went in and said, "Hey, I have a demon hunter and a mage. What do you need?" And so I got my start off in raiding as a frost mage. I did try arcane. It's a lot of fun. Very bad though. So I got my first AOTCs frost mage. But tanking is something I'd always wanted to do. So like when I got to like warlords, I was doing random heroics, LFR, as Prot Paladin. Wanted to try DPSing, and started tanking Mythic Plus and Legion, and that's where I fell in love with Vengeance, and finally got the chance to start tanking in Raid in BFA. When I did get back into Raid, or when I got into Raid tanking, I played Protection Paladin. It's something, it was like my dream to do since Burning Crusade. I dove into that. So AOTC with that in Crucible and Eternal Palace. Like you, I picked up Monk going into 8-3. So that is around the time that I joined Ponecast, and that is where the persona of Brewseph came from. And I've kind of just bounced around all the different tank classes since 8-3, just trying to not necessarily figure out what I like, but what do I find the most fun at the moment. I know you listen to me complain on a daily basis on what I'm going to play in season 4, because I don't know.
The answer is whatever you feel like that day.
Yes, that is the right answer.
Yeah, just a quick background. So I didn't raid at all in BFA, and for most of Shadowlands, it wasn't until some changes in my life happened and my schedule opened up, and I kind of just was invited to the raid randomly by Brew one day, and I came in as Windwalker and was like, God, I hadn't played Windwalker in so long because I'd just been tanking keys, and like I raided a little bit in 9.0 with a guild that I tried to build, and then like 2/3 of the guild ditched us when we were at like 50% on Sire Heroics, so we never got AOTC because the guild ditched us and we couldn't fill it with pugs. So like for me, like getting back into raiding, it was more just about like, well, let me just have some fun with these people. That was kind of my thing. And like first few raids I was DPS and I hated it, and I was like begging Drew to let me tank, and like one day he was just like, all right dude, all of our other tanks are like down and out for some reason, so you're in. And literally the first night I raid tanked since like 2019, 2020, I guess, was the Jailer. That was like the first fight that I tanked or something like it was Lord's Dread. And ever since then, the tank team in the iconic raid has been Brewseph and myself. So that's why we are doing this, because we are the tanks of our guild. We tank most of the Mythic Plus runs. I'm only playing one tank right now because I have my own special challenge for season 4, but I have played all of the tanks in the past. Demon Hunter I've bounced off of because I've never been able to find it enjoyable. Same with Prot Warrior. And but the other tanks, like I have love-hate relationships with all of them except Monk. But there have been some things that have been happening with Druid. I've always had a soft spot for because I played Druid for a long time, but Paladin has always been a class that like I've wanted to try and main. It just has always fallen behind some other class. So that's, depending on how Monk is, Paladin's kind of like in second place right now. So, but yeah, that's why we're both talking tanks, is because we're both the main tanks for our raid, and we tank like a majority of the keys in our Mythic Plus groups.
Yeah, and I've even tanked in the Oasis Keystone building.
That's right.
Tournaments. I'm the tank for Catgirl Bathwater. I've played Vengeance Demon Hunter in season 1 for them, and in season 2 I played Protection Paladin.
Yeah. The ethos of spam the world for Catgirl, or whatever the copy pasta is.
Spam the swirl if you're a fan of Catgirl.
That's what it is. Yeah. I remember watching that tournament specifically to watch you guys push keys, and that was kind of another reason where I was like, man, I want to push the 20s, and like I didn't think I was ever gonna get it, and then I joined this group, and now like outside of just kind of stopping the push a little bit this season, I basically feel like I'm capable of doing that for season 4. So
absolutely, man. Yeah, you absolutely are. DPSing for you in keys is always fun because you understand placement and positioning and how to pull around cooldowns. So yeah, having people that have the same mindset is the hardest thing to find with the same schedule.
Oh yeah, I've pugged keys with pug tanks, and it bothers the hell out of me because like most of them don't plant their feet at all, and I'm like, bro, I'm a ret paladin or I'm windwalker monk, like you don't move all my targets, please. Like I know I can move while spinning crane kicking, but don't. I'd rather not. So like tanking with Brew and with a couple of other folks that tank and kind of like have learned, I guess, over experience or talking amongst the community, where they just are like, hey, I'm gonna plant my feet right here and I'm not moving unless I have to. And it's like, thank the Lord. So speaking of tanking, let's go ahead and talk about like the current state of tanking before we get into like Dragonflight, because I think like the current state, particularly of these 3 specs, I think will be like a really good baseline for us to kind of develop off of. So from your thoughts and your opinions, Brew, as we are like 4 or 5 days from season 4, what are your thoughts kind of generally about tanking in Shadowlands now versus like you're in alpha and I'm not, so like the little bit that you've done in alpha, like what are there big differences between the two?
So I've really only tanked on Paladin so far. I've done a bit of Frost DK on Alpha, but as far as protection, Paladin, it definitely feels weaker, but that's to be expected at the start of an expansion, and you're kind of fishing for stats and hoping to get more of the right ones. But I don't want to go too far into this because I know the next topic is exactly what I'm going to dive into or want to dive into right now. But how I feel about Paladin, I have concerns about it. Right now, I think in season 4, Paladin is in a very good spot, especially with the trinkets coming back at higher item level, even though Old Warrior Soul is going to get nerfed a little bit. And the way the Mythic Plus affix works for Prot Paladin, I think it's going to benefit in the same way that it did in Shadowlands Season 2 from Tormented and just wanting stat stick anima powers then.
Yeah.
And so I feel like Paladin's going to be in a really strong spot in Season 4, and you're going to have all this mastery, you're going to have all this verse, depending on what you go with in Season 4. And by the end of the key, you're in consecration and you're just taking no damage. You have all this haste from your gear that, you're keeping Shield of the Righteous up all the time. You're able to heal your party. You can, you have utility, and your healer is just allowed to pump damage like it's nobody's business, because you have so much holy power to spend that you need to dump it either into more damage or into healing. And it's a really good feedback loop. But the issue I have going into alpha is you have less stats, and the way they're looking at some of the design for Paladin, I don't necessarily know if I agree with it.
Okay.
But I'm hopeful for tanking in Dragonflight, because from what I've seen, it sounds like they really do want us to feel like we aren't losing too much at the start of the expansion.
Yeah, and I've seen, I think it was in interviews where Ian said that like they want to take some of the pressure off tanks, particularly in dungeon runs. You and I both know that like the tanking role in dungeons versus tanking in raid is like significantly different. Like there are some things that carry over, but like the amount of pressure that's on you in a raid versus Mythic Plus is like, almost night and day. And so them looking at, if I recall those interviews correctly, them looking to take pressure off of tanks to like have to do like so much in a Mythic Plus dungeon, I think is gonna make it an interesting choice. And we haven't really seen how that's gonna be developed yet because they're still trying to fix the bugs and stuff and just get the basics in right now. But hopefully as we move into beta, we can start getting a better feel for how all of that's going. I don't disagree with your assessment on Prot Paladin. I haven't played it a ton this expansion because kind of was just focused a lot on Druid, or excuse me, on Monk, and then was trying to find an alt and played a lot of Hunter, but trying to find another alt to play, and I've kind of just looped back to Paladin very recently, mainly Ret. But in season 4, if I accomplish everything that I want to accomplish, I've debated pushing my Paladin a little bit, trying to get gear sets for all 3 specs and trying it again. But generally speaking, like we know that like was it Andy Brew was running like every top key in season 2, felt like it was him on his Prot Paladin. So like,
yeah,
I definitely agree with the assessment. I think it's in a really good spot now. I know the Holy Power coming back was kind of split the community of Prot Paladin a little bit, just from my recollection of their reactions. Some of them really loved the idea, some of them really hated it. And based on what you said about Alpha and what we've kind of already read into like talent trees, 'cause, we're going to obviously talk about the talent trees, and it's not the first time you and I have been looking at these. You and I both have probably been playing with them since the day they came out. But like, we're kind of seeing like a weird mixture of them going back to like pulling some power out of Shield of the Righteous, which kind of was what happened in BFA with the charge system. There was just no way to maintain uptime unless you had like 50% haste, in which case you sacrificed too many other stats and you were still paper thin. With a combination of like slowing down holy power generation to allow like that Shield of the Righteous power to be taken out. And I mean, it does concern me. I understand the reasoning that they do it, because I think they've probably are seeing Paladin as being a little too one note. Like, you're not really like, I don't know if this is correct, but I get the feeling that they see Paladins are not really like, oh, they don't have to utilize Word of Glory on themselves. They're not really utilizing Ardent Defender. They're not really utilizing Guardian of Ancient Kings as much as we would like them to, because they just have Shield of the Righteous up forever. And so I think that's kind of their logic for taking away some of the power out of Shield of the Righteous, which I'm not as upset about as some other Paladins are, as long as everything else around it feels good. And that's the question to be answered.
I agree, but the problem is, the problem that I've noticed with Paladin is there are times that I will still die in like a 22 when I have Shield of the Righteous and Ardent Defender up. And I know we're talking higher keys here, and I'm not doing anything like world first keys for Paladin, like 30s.
Yeah.
But I mean, even then, like I notice like how, even though it's up all the time, if it falls off because I need a Word of Glory, sometimes it's a little better. And because of the way Word of Glory works, where you get more healing based on the percentage of health that you're missing,
yeah,
sometimes it's more beneficial for you to play like a Death Knight, where okay, you build it up, you take the big hit, and you just Word of Glory, boom, you've healed it back up. You're playing like a Death Knight, and that's why I don't necessarily agree with them wanting to taking power out of Shield of the Righteous. Especially if I'm dying in it and a cooldown like Ardent Defender. And I mean, even in early Shadowlands, like you when you would hit that like 21% haste breakpoint, that's when you started getting 100 or around 100% uptime on your Shield of the Righteous, and you still were slamming your CDs on cooldown because you were just taking so much damage, up until they brought in the passive extra DR for all the tanks, and then obviously they tuned down a lot of the mob damage, like their melees, going into season 2, and having to rely on Ardent Defender and Kings. Ardent Defender, you get a lot of CDR on it, and you can have it up a lot, which is really nice, but it still doesn't feel the way that I think it should. Like if I am playing good and I'm playing an optimal rotation, I should have my mitigation up, and it should feel more like a Prot warrior. Maybe not as strong as shield block, right? Because shield block is never really going to have 100% uptime. But even if it was like a step down, and then you had your toolkit around yourself to prop up where you're lacking, I think that would be a better spot. And I'm just more concerned at the place where paladins are going into content, even when they're geared and they're getting global, they're getting 100 zeroed. I remember watching the most recent Race to World First. I want to say it was Now from Echo, where he went in, it was either Rygalon or Jailer. They did like 2 pulls and he was like, nah, this doesn't feel good, and went right back to his DK because he was just getting absolutely trucked by just the auto attacks from the boss. And it was just not possible to live. And I mean, that was an issue on Sire to Nathrace as well as Prot Paladin, because you couldn't stand in your consecration. There was a lot of movement, and it just couldn't live until later on into the patch.
Yeah, well, Sire to Nathrace, I think, is a little bit of a unique case because he crushed almost every tank. Like even his
except Vengeance.
Except Vengeance, because they were double dipping all their defensives. But like, yeah, like even as Brewmaster, I remember the few pulls I did on Heroic of that fight. Like even Brewmaster, who doesn't give a shit about burst damage at all. You know, they're just like, all right, I took a hit, that's cool. Even me, I was like, oh my god, I don't have enough defensives for this. He hurts, you know. Until, like you said, we started to overgear it a little bit. You know, but
oh yeah, like. Because even then, like even on Brewmaster, because I did do the fight on Brewmaster before I brought my Demon Hunter back Alliance, and playing Brewmaster on that fight was great for some aspects of it, like Transcendence for Phase 1. Yes. Amazing. But I mean, Phase 1, I never really had an issue with this Brewmaster. It was like once you got into Phase 2 and Phase 3, and you're getting that dot.
Oh yeah.
It just absolutely crushed you. Like Stagger didn't really help against it, and you're slamming your scale. You're slamming Dampen Harm, Fort Brew, Celestial Brew. Like you're using those on cooldown, and you're just like, how do I live? Yeah. Because at the time you didn't have like the same levels of crit and verse that we have now, for just the self sustain.
The 10% DR wasn't in either at that time.
It wasn't. Like, yeah. I remember that there were times like we're moving the boss, and the other tank had him, and I stopped. I sat there and just vivified myself, and I'm like, I am not dying.
Yeah, tanking has been a journey this expansion. It's probably been, I think, of any role has had kind of like the wildest swings in how bad versus good it's felt. So. Alright, well, I'm sharing my screen in Discord if you wanted to take a look at that so we can kind of run this together, but we'll go ahead and talk about the Paladin talent tree, and then we'll get into the protection tree itself. So we'll start with just the spec tree side. What are the highlights of this tree, and what are some of the things that you think could be improved upon?
Honestly, for the class tree, there's a lot of things that are in here that I disagree with being in here. Like why do I have to take a talent for judgment generating holy power? Why, I know a lot of people say this, why is rebuke in here? I think rebuke should just be baseline for all 3 specs. Like I don't mind utility such as like Blessing of Sacrifice being in here, or like improving Avenging Wrath. I mean, because like the weirdest thing, right, is like you can skip Avenging Wrath in this class tree, and you can still get Avenging Wrath. Like it'll grant you Avenging Wrath in the protection tree. It's just you get an extra bonus if you've learned it from your class tree. Like, to me, that just seems disjointed.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know I like any of the capstones very much for Prot.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Capstones, for anyone that's not aware, Mad Paragon did get a small change to where the cooldown or the extension on Avenging Wrath has been dropped from 1 second to half a second. But instead of being just Hammer of Wrath, they added Judgment to this. So it's like a trade-off because you're getting a rotational ability that can now extend your Avenging Wrath, but at the cost of not being able to extend it as much. It kind of needs to be played out to see just how much of a buff it is for certain specs. I think for Prot,
Really bad.
and Seasoned Warhorse is like 2 seconds for 2 points. So you get, like right now, I think I just got a 265 light Sparding, so I'm getting like 6 or 7 seconds or something like that on Divine Steed, and it feels good to the point that I don't even take Cavalier because the one that I have is sufficient. Well, now it's going to be like, oh, you can get 3 seconds baseline plus 2 more seconds for 3 points total. Like, it's so bad, and I think they should probably just take the Cavalier, Seasoned Warhorse, and Divine Steed and just combine it all and make, give it 2 charges baseline, give it the 5 second duration instead of 3. And of course, they've already talked about this, but it's a 1 minute recharge currently in the talent tree. It's because they kind of forgot to put the 15 second cooldown reduction in for the rank 2 of it, but that should be going into the next build, so not the end of days.
Yeah.
The other
honestly,
thing,
honestly, like with Cavalier, I wouldn't take 2 charges or the extension just because maybe I've just played too much DK, maybe I've played too much Paladin in the current iteration where you don't usually take Cavalier, so you had 1 charge. So to me, I'm just gonna have the 1 and it'd be baseline and just go with it because I'd rather spend those points elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, like the choice to take the extra charge and the extra time isn't really a choice because there's so much other stuff that's going on that it's there. One of my other big problems about this is that it doesn't feel good to have utility be the only way to get down the tree. Like, you have the Blinding Like Repentance node, Fist of Justice. The only ways to get to like Seal of Alacrity, which also is kind of underwhelming, and like Holy Aegis, which is underwhelming. And then like you have like After Image versus Obduracy to get down to the bottom of the tree. Like, I don't think that feels great. I think if you put throughput talents there, like instead of Obduracy, you put the choice node of Holy Avenger or Divine Purpose there. I think people make that choice feel a lot better. Same with like After Image, maybe you put Judgment of Light or Golden Path in its place or something like that. I think people would be much more comfortable making that type of choice versus like, oh, I need to get, Retribution Aura 2 seconds off of Fist of Justice whenever I spend Holy Power, and 2% haste just to get like my kick and 20% extra Holy Power damage and Seal of Reprisal. Like, I think the idea of putting a lot of utility in this tree for Paladin, I think it's fine, but the other problem they did is they put in a ton of throughput talents that feel mandatory as a result.
Yes. Here, I'm going to link you one I built, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on it.
All right, let's pull this build here.
And
so we'll just look at the Paladin side of the tree for now, and then I'll switch to another tab and kind of show the differences actually looking at it. I'm not seeing much in the way of difference that I would do.
yeah, and the only thing I would do is if you're playing with something, like if you're playing with like a monk in your group, right? You're playing with a Mistweaver, you're playing with a Windwalker, you can probably, depending on the dungeon, and we've only seen, 3 of them so far, so we don't really know how bad poison and disease effects are. Like this, like something like Cleanse Toxins is absolutely mandatory in a Plaguefall or a Theater of Pain.
Yeah.
From the 2 dungeons that I've done so far, there has not been very much poison or disease. So it's not going to feel like more is beneficial. So you could probably drop cleanse toxins if you have someone else that can do poison and or diseases, and you could probably take Seal of the Templar. And I feel like Seal of the Templar could end up having some really interesting gameplay. It's right there. And the reason I like this is because like in something like Raid, it probably could allow you to do stance dancing, right? So most raids are going to have a Holy Paladin where they're just going to run the Diva Aura for Aura Mastery, right? So that allows your Prot and your Ret Paladins to run Retribution Aura, because especially in early prog, people are going to die. You're going to get extra damage from it. However, Seal of the Templar is giving Hammer of the Righteous, your Interrupt, your Crusader Strike, all of that, Hammer of Justice, an increased range of 3 yards. So I know it's certain abilities, but being able to increase the range even by 3 yards, I mean, you might as well be a rogue. If you are able to stance dance between Retribution Aura and Crusader Aura, okay, well, let's say there's some area of denial around the boss, or you're spreading like on Jailer, right, for Torment.
Mm-hmm.
You could still be in range for your builders with something like this, and I think that's really good, especially with the way the nature of Protection Paladin right now is you're not generating holy power at the same rate that you have been, and because of that, being able to have that extra range when you need it is very good, so that way you can keep building and spending.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being a play. And just again, for anyone not familiar, when he references holy power generation being lower, it's because Blizzard made it so that Avenger's Shield does not generate holy power anymore, which I think everyone's questioned that decision and trying to figure out why, but it's where we're at right now. Maybe we get enough feedback and they get enough data that says otherwise, but yeah, right now Avenger's Shield doesn't generate it, so holy power generation is feeling lower, because basically all you have is either Blessed Hammer or Hammer of the Righteous, whichever you choose, and Judgment being the only ways to generate holy power. So it's like, it's definitely feeling limited, and to me it also makes this one choice no choice. Like, you get 1 charge of Hammer of the Righteous or 3 Blessed Hammer, and I don't think it's a choice. So
yeah, or no, it's 2 versus 3, and with the way so the way holy power generation works or feels right now, it's like, if you don't have Blessed Hammer, you're not going to be generating enough. And it's like, speaking from using the training dummy and doing a couple of dungeons, Blessed Hammer is not working on alpha right now.
Yeah,
you press it, it uses 1 charge, you wait for your hammers to go away, or when the charge comes back, and you're able to press it again. You can't use 3 globals, use all 3 charges like you can now, and you can't even spend your other 2 charges the way it is right now, which obviously isn't intended. So any dungeons that I've done because of that, I've actually run with Hammer of the Righteous instead, which, I mean, even with 2 chargers still doesn't feel good, because there's still times that I don't have holy power to use Shield of the Righteous.
yeah, I can definitely see the holy power generation. And I think that's the big thing. Like, I'm actually wanting to try out of Dusk and Dawn on Prot, because I think there is potential for it to be really good, whether you're getting Dawn or Dusk, because like in both cases you're gaining, because your defensive power is being shifted in ways that are generally unpredictable. But with the way that holy power generation is right now, I just don't see it being a viable pick, like, unless they bring back the holy power off of Avenger's Shield. Because if they do that, then I think of Dusk and Dawn as a very good pick for both Raid and Mythic Plus. But until we can get enough stats or enough holy power generation, I just don't see it being a play, which is unfortunate because I think it limits the bottom of this tree pretty significantly.
No, it definitely does. And the build I sent you, this is all about having more wings uptime, right?
Yeah.
With Sanctified Wrath and Mad Paragon. Just because, wings is a very impactful cooldown. You can do a lot of damage with it. So having it last, 25% longer each judgment, generating additional holy power during wings, and, judgment extending it, along with Hammer of Wrath extending it, it gives you the chance to have very high uptime of wings, or a really big burst window, which feels good on no matter what class or spec you play.
True. Yeah. Looking at this build, honestly, because Dusk and Dawn doesn't feel like an option right now, the only thing I would change is that if we don't need Cleanse Toxins, I'd come get Incandescence. And not Seal of the Templar. I'd grab either Touch of Light or Incandescence, whichever one happens to be better. Because there's a lot of consecration talents in here. You've got Hallowed Ground, you've got Golden Path just in the tree itself. I think that makes Incandescence a little bit better. But if you need Cleanse Toxins, I think Incandescence is the point that goes. Maybe even Hallowed Ground. But the rest of this build I pretty much agree with. The diamond around where Seal of Alacrity and Seal of Repriser is here on the right side of this tree. This diamond section here I think could use some tweaking. If anything, I think what they should have done is taken Rebuke and switched it with Seal of Alacrity. That way it actually feels okay to get, for all three specs to get it, because of the specs that have gained their kick, they're making it so the healers have to sacrifice something to get it. But I don't think that healers, if Holy Paladin, if Rebuke was up with tier where Seal of Alacrity is, I still think Holy Paladins are giving up a lot because they have to invest 3 points into Retribution and Crusader Ores, which they'll never use because they're always the Devo bot, plus Fist of Justice. So, yeah, they're giving up something, but the other thing that it does is that it can free up a lot of points for the other two specs. Prot in particular, I think, could benefit greatly from it because then you have your choice. Do you get 2% haste, or do you get the range, or do you get Turn Evil? With aberrations and demons, may or may not be all that useful, but, if you need a little bit of, CC, you have that option. So,
yeah. I'm okay. So, as far as the class tree and what Holy gives up, I actually don't think they're giving up a lot because they're going to want to get down to Mad Paragon anyway. And haste is an incredibly good stat for Holy. And yeah, they probably could benefit a lot from Seal of the Templar themselves. Their holy power spending abilities, they don't really use Shield of the Righteous. They can if they want more damage. So I guess Seal of Reprisal doesn't really matter for them. Yeah. But Rebuke is huge for them because they're already in melee.
Agreed.
And so the only time you'd really want Rebuke is in Mythic Plus. You don't necessarily need it in Raid, which having the extra points in Fists of Justice and getting the haste, which is a stat that they're probably going to take. They're going to take Seal of Alacrity in any content. It's fine. But they need a way to get down to Mad Paragon, which is their default. So I don't necessarily think it's bad for Holy. But there are other ways to get down to Mad Paragon. And the whole left side of the tree, I think they would rather have anyway.
I agree. After Image, obviously not yet implemented, but I think that's good AoE healing on their single target. Obviously, we'll have to see how smart this nearby ally is. Is it a lot like Renewing Mist on Mistweaver, where it goes to an injured target, or is it more like, again, Mistweaver, I know that healer very well, where Ancient Teachings of the Monastery, when you rise after you Essence Font, for the next 15 seconds, all your abilities, but mainly Rising Sun Kick will heal a nearby ally within 20 yards. That heal is not smart. I have overhealed so much with that with that legendary. But even the stuff down here on this side of the tree, like Seal of Clarity I think is interesting. Aspirations of Divinity for both Holy and Red I think is interesting, but like I'm just really worried about the Holy Power generation particularly for Prot, but even for Holy a little bit too. We'll have to see how their tree is out. For those not aware, as of recording, they delayed the Holy tree by like a week for reasons we don't know yet. So I'll probably do a video on that because I'm interested in healing, but that'll be separate going down the line. So overall, on a scale of like 1 to 10, 1 being like priest trees because they're pretty garbage in the spec tree, to 10 being shaman, like where would you rate this paladin class tree overall?
I'd probably give it a 5 or a 6. I mean, even if you look at something like After Image, something that I know I didn't put in this build, it's something that you could consider a Mythic Plus, right? If you're looking at a healer that is more of a damage healer and less of a throughput healer, right? So like, let's talk about like if you're a Prot Paladin running with a Holy Paladin, or you're running with a Disc Priest or a Resto Shaman, right? It's like something that can put out a lot of damage, but they sacrifice a lot of healing to do it. After Image probably becomes an option, right? Because you can give up something like Mad Paragon or Sanctified Wrath and get it. So I like the flexibility, but I'm still not blown away with the capstones, and a lot of stuff feels mandatory to get to where you need to go.
I agree. After Image, from the protections point of view, I think actually it could potentially have some really good value with Shining Light getting changed to be every 3 instead of every 5.
Yes.
Like you're getting
agreed.
That sounds like you're going to get a lot more. And if you are like me and you like the left-hand side of the Prot tree, which we're going to get into in just a second, you're getting Hand of the Protector. So that means you can use it on other targets. All of a sudden, if you can heal one, help heal a low health target and it bounces to someone else that took a little bit of damage, say on like a Shard of Halkias style mechanic, then all of a sudden you're doing a lot of off healing, which, Paladin has kind of always been the closest thing to a support class that WoW has ever seen. It's not quite like supports in, say, like shooters or even in, like MOBAs, but it's kind of the closest thing you've ever gotten. Does a little bit of damage, does a little bit of healing, but has all this other cool stuff that it can do to make everyone else's lives easier. And something like After Image, I think, really plays into that for Prot. It's like, yeah, I don't need all this because I'm burly and tanky and can deal with all of this stuff, in theory. Here, I'll heal you, and I'll also heal you while I'm at it. Like, that kind of fantasy, I think, is very powerful, and, they're hitting those notes. It's just, do they make sense in the greater composition, to use music terms? So, but let's talk about the protection side of the tree. We'll look at your build here, which you and I have very different builds on this, I think. Not very different. There are definitely some things that I would do differently. So let's talk through your thought process on this particular build. I'll just point out kind of the things that I see that I think would be interesting. So you chose Redoubt over Inner Light. What was the decisioning behind that?
Strength and stamina are always going to be very good stats for Paladin. And I mean, so just being able to have, anytime you use Shield of the Righteous, it gives you 2% per stack, right, for 10 seconds.
Yeah, up to 3
and
stacks.
Yeah, and I'm assuming once you get more haste, right, like it's going to become something that you have permanently. So you permanently are having 6% extra strength and stamina, which, I mean, Paladins are known for having a very small health pool. I think that's something that has hindered them.
Yeah,
because it's something that is one of the reasons that you see them do go 100 to 0 is because they have a smaller health pool than a lot of the other tanks, except maybe Brewmaster.
Yeah, Brewmaster's still the smallest.
Yeah, and so doing anything you can to increase that, I think, is very, very good. Inner Light, to me, like I think getting extra block and doing extra damage is all good, but I think Redoubt ends up outscaling it just because you're getting 2% strength and not like a flat value of damage.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Inner Light might have play early on when we're not able to maintain as much uptime on Shield of the Righteous, so you're gaining this block a lot more often, and there's potential for your readout stats to fall off. I do agree that as we gain stats and as they make tweaks and adjustments and stuff like that, or if our holy power generation increases for whatever reason, then readout absolutely becomes the play. But I do think early on, with kind of what we know right now, I think Inner Light absolutely has some possibilities, because if you're not going to have full Shield of the Righteous uptime, you might as well get a decent, it's a small chunk of block, but hopefully it maybe scales with strength or something like that, where it becomes a little bit more potent. Let's see, everything else in the
that
top
would be really nice.
Yeah, everything else in the top tier I agree with. Now, you took Inspiring Vanguard and Crusader's Judgment. Crusader's Judgment, a 20-row talent now that gives 2 charges of Judgment, and then Inspiring Vanguard is an old Azerite trait that's coming back. I think it's in a little bit of a nerf version, but I think that's probably okay. I don't take these 2 talents in the build that I made. Why did you take these?
For me, I really like the Avengers Shield reset. It's not giving us, holy power, but it's still extremely strong in Mythic Plus, right? Because you're still going to want to interrupt. And right now, like, they actually admitted that the interrupt and silence is currently missing from Avengers Shield, which is not intended. It's missing in the talent tree and on the base ability. So I always want Avengers Shield. It's always going to be good damage, and resets of that are fine in my opinion, especially if it's going to give you more strength, right? So like if you get a proc and then you use Shield of the Righteous, and so it's kind of playing off like with Redoubt, right? So you have more strength, you use Shield of the Righteous, you get 2%, right? And that's 2% of what you have.
True. So things like Potion of Strength or whatever the new potions and files do could potentially scale that pretty harshly. Okay, yeah, I see the value in that. I think for me personally, I would probably take these 2 points out and move them down into getting the second point in Crusader's Resolve, and then grab the choice node, depending on the situation there. Bulwark Registry for Mythic Plus. I think Moment of Glory probably does better in AoE with like the single target shield talents, but I think it's just because I'm a big fan of Bulwark, and I like the idea of Moment of Glory, even though it's a 1.5 minute cooldown, so it's not like something you would have up all the time. It's another decent defensive cooldown for a spec that really feels like it needs a lot more. So
yeah,
but
I agree.
But I can see these points being valuable too. Sure.
Yeah, I definitely think you at least at minimum want Grand Crusader.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because you want Crusader's Judgment, because you need the 2 charges, because you're not getting holy power from Avengers Shield. So you want to have Judgment. And I mean, we also took in class tree, we took Judgment. Judgment causes the target to take 25% increased damage from your next holy power ability. So, you can build, get 2 holy power, Judgment, Shield of the Righteous, build Judgment, and so you kind of get a feedback loop where you're always using Judgment before you Shield of the Righteous, and you're getting 25% extra damage on top of it.
Yeah.
And it also helps because more holy power is better. Yeah,
specifically if they don't revert Avengers Shield not generating a holy power, I could see Crusader's Judgment becoming pretty important, which means you do sacrifice the Capstone talent, Bulwark Righteous Fury, Moment of Glory, or the Divine Resonance, essentially, because I don't think anyone's taking Improved Sarah and DT if you go the right side of the tree. Pretty much your build's pretty much the same that I would do with Holy Shield, Consecrated Ground, Bulwark of Order, into Resolute Defender to get the Ardent Defender cooldown. I would like to see maybe Ardent Defender cooldown, like, I would like to see this be more than 2 seconds. I think maybe 4 would be better at 2 points.
I agree.
And then, of course, you get Guardian of Ancient Queens, because I prefer the Queen's version to the King's version. Faith's Armor, giving more armor on Shield of the Righteous. This feels weird being this far down the tree. I think it would have been better off being, like, up where, like, maybe Consecration and Flame would be at. Just because, like, 2% armor. Again, I think in the blue place they said something like, when you use Shield of the Righteous, they want you to feel like you're very powerful. But then they only give you an extra 2% armor on it. Like,
yeah, it's not much.
If you're gonna put this talent down here, I think it needs to be
like
a
10.
minimum. Yeah, probably. I would even be okay with 5 if they wanted to be cautious with it. But I think 10% absolutely is a number that's there. Righteous Protector, which is I don't know if it's bugged, if they fixed it, but at least there's a clip on Brewseff's Twitch channel of him basically using one Shield of the Righteous and getting Avenging Wrath completely reset because they accidentally made it 100 seconds per holy power spent. So he was getting 300.
I missed a decimal.
Yeah, they missed the decimal. So Tooltip here has it at 0.1 seconds, which I think is what was intended, but it was funny. And then Ive tier, I think I agree with this. This is another defensive cooldown in a way. Yeah, it does holy damage too, which, you know, you're not gonna be upset about, but getting 25% DR for 9 seconds on top of like Ardent Defender's 20 plus whatever you're getting in Consecration, like, I think they kind of see Protection Paladin in somewhat of a similar vein to like Blood DK before they made Blood DK busted as hell, where you were rotating like Vampiric Blood and Icebound Fortitude and Lichborn with the DR, even Dancing Rune Weapon as a parry tool, not so much a become a one-button spam tool. I think they're kind of trying to put Paladin in kind of that same niche. That's the vibe that I'm getting from this tree, at least.
And I don't mind that, because to me that was when DK was the most fun, in my opinion.
I agree.
I mean, I am very greedy when I play Blood Death Knight. I will 100% admit that, right? Like, I actively avoid trying to run the conduit that makes Lichborn a 10% DR, because I want bigger numbers. I want to hit Death Strike, and I want it to be the biggest number possible. So, take bigger hit, heal more, right? Like, that is the exciting part of Blood DK, right? As long as you don't get one shot, you can live anything. And I'm okay with them going this route on more tanks, just as long as that choice is in my hands, and that choice being I am in control of my own life, right? And I think they are going that direction with changing... why can't I think of the name of the talent? But the talent to make Word of Glory free after 3 charges instead of Shining Light. Yeah, you're going to have that free Word of Glory more, which is good. And when I was doing the dungeon, even though it was resetting, Shield of Righteous was resetting Wings and Guardian every time I hit Shield of the Righteous. Like, if Kings or Queens dropped, right, then I was getting blasted, and I was in the heroic, I was going from like 100 to like 30 or 100 to 20, and I just instantly hit Word of Glory, topped right back off, which felt really good. It felt like I had agency, I had time to react and use it. Still wish it was off the cooldown, but that's
Agreed.
A different topic.
Agreed on both. Yeah. I don't hate that gameplay either, because like I played a lot of Blood and BFA. Blood and Bear were like the 2 tanks that I played the majority of in BFA, and those 2 tanks were like night and day in that expansion. you know, and a little bit of Blood I played pre 9.2 before converting my Death Knight to an Unholy One trick. Like, that gameplay loop was still there with DK, where it's like you want to know that you have a cooldown available for almost any situation, and that's what I think is really cool about Blood DK. I don't hate that idea, like you said, on Prot Paladin. They just got to make sure that when you're in those cooldowns that you're there, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of block being added in with Holy Shield, Inner Light, Faith Barricade, giving you 10% while you're after you use Avenger Shield, which honestly I think I'm kind of surprised. You took Sanctuary, which I get 5% additional DR and Consecration, but with the Crusader's Judgment and Inspiring Vanguard and stuff like that, with trying to proc more Avenger Shield resets, you could probably have really strong uptime, 20% more block with that. So like, I think like this right here with the Relentless Inquisitor, Sanctuary, Faith Barricade, going down into the Divine Toll side of the tree, like I really like all three of these talents because, like, you know, we take more haste. You know, I don't think any class will say no to haste except Windwalker Monk and Brewmaster. But like, I think that was the other difference in our builds, is that I'm taking the left side Capstone and I'm taking Faith Barricade. So
and I think it also can depend on like what content you're doing too, right?
Yeah.
So or what you're trying to do. Like if you're playing something on a necrotic week, Sanctuary probably doesn't make sense to take because you're going to be kiting a whole lot more. You're going to be out of your consecration, so you're not going to get a lot of value out of it. And so that extra block value or extra block chance is way more valuable when you're not going to be able to stay in still. So imagine having Faith Barricade on a fight like Sire Denathrius or a fight like Jailer.
Oh yeah,
like that is way more valuable. But on a fight like Rygalon, where you move the boss, you plant, and you just want to keep concentration up, I think just the passive DR is much better on those fights.
Yeah, I think the choice on this kind of split is just going to depend on tuning, like,
yeah,
and maybe a little
tuning
bit of build
and
play
what
style.
you're fighting.
Yeah, but I don't mind stuff like that. Like, I love that. Like, hey, what side do I pick is going to be based on, okay, at that current time, which one's better. Like, I don't mind that type of choice. Like, you know, and especially if it's on the same tier. You know, same goes for like Tears Enforcer versus Farron Marcus's Strength. You know, Farron Marcus's Strength has potential in M+ still if you got like a big priority target, a Shard of Palkia style mob. Like, I'm just always going to Avenger Shield that thing because it has more health than everything else around it. Like, there is that possibility too. So,
yeah,
I think
and it's very good in raid.
Yeah, I think my biggest complaints about this tree is that I feel like it's slightly bloated. Like, you're spending 2 points in Bulwark of Order, you're spending 2 points in Righteous Protector, 2 points in Gift of the Golden Valkyrie if you want to go that route. You also have 2 points in Light of the Titans, which you and I both skipped, but then also 2 points in Strength of Conviction, which I would love to have, but it's behind a really poor talent, and there's no other way to get there. So, like, I would like to see maybe some of the, like, I think these middle ones, Bulwark of Order and Light of the Titans, if they were cut down to only 1 point each, I think that makes some of these options, like grabbing Sanctuary and Faith Barricade, a lot more interesting. But I think that might be the only other complaint I have. Honestly, like, I don't hate this tree as much as I know some other folks I've read online are kind of bashing it on. Would you generally agree with that?
Yeah, I feel like I am a lot more optimistic about it, this tree, than other people. I mean, if you think about it, right, Light of the Titans is sort of like stagger, if you think about it, or I guess a better way to look at it would be brush it off the Kulturian racial ability or the condensed Animosphere. But whenever you use Word of Glory, and if they're trying to put more power in Word of Glory and using that to top yourself up and going to have downtime and Shield of the Righteous, I mean, basically putting a hot on yourself for 15 seconds isn't bad. Like, I mean, that's always going to be welcome, and that's less healing that you're going to require.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's I mean, I guess you could compare it to DK's Blood Shield, right? You Death Strike, you get the Blood Shield. Well, this you Word of Glory, and you have a hot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the middle tier, as I call them, the middle tier, the 8 to 20 section, I think is probably a little bit too bloated in general. Like, there's a lot of really cool ideas in this section of the tree. And, like, I would love to get a lot more of them. And I know there's like, oh, we don't want you choosing everything in the tree. But, like, even cutting down 1 or 2 nodes to down to 1 point, I think opens up a lot of really cool potential options. Now, I know it's not yet implemented, but what's your read on Sentinel? Like, do you think this is going to be good? I'm not sure what to make of it.
It makes wings also, like, because you get these 15 stacks when you press wings, if I'm reading it correctly, right?
Yeah.
So you press wings, you get 15 stacks, increases your maximum health by 2% and reducing damage taken by 2%, right? So what you're getting 30% DR, 30% maximum health. And then you start losing them. I mean, as long as it doesn't feel like the Brewmaster tier set, I think it's probably going to be fine. I think it probably has a lot of value early on and probably in higher keys where you probably want wings more defensively than offensively. Probably could be like if you're under-geared mythic tanking, probably, okay, I know this big tank it's coming. Wings is going to be up. I pop wings. I get a 30% DR on whatever hit I'm taking, on top of all of the block and armor that I'm getting from Shield of the Righteous, Avenger Shield, and whatnot. So, I mean, it does, So it's giving you a lot, especially if you can play it right. But you also don't want to sit there and go, okay, it's up, but I know in 1 minute I'm going to need it. Well, if at that point, right, you don't want to feel like you have to let wings sit on cooldown for a minute because you're not going to have anything else, because that's going to feel bad.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So I think the talent has real potential, and I'm very curious when it gets implemented what it's going to feel like to play with. So I'll be definitely keeping an eye on that. All right, so for the protection paladin tree on a scale of feral druid to enhancement shaman, what are we thinking?
Honestly, I'm probably gonna give it like average, so it's like 5 to 6. I'm very optimistic about it, but I understand people's concerns. I still have my own concerns about it because I mean it is bloated, and I feel like there's a lot of things that are mandatory that we're used to having now that we just can't get back to the same power level. And that's, I mean, that never feels good.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more bullish on it. I'm going to give it a 7. I think there's some really, really cool ideas in here. I think there's some really nice build paths that you can take depending on both content and playstyle preference, which, to me, that's like really important. Like, if you want to go Divine Toll Resonance on the right side, Capstone, because you just like the idea of throwing 5 shields out all at the same time, I think that's going to be just as good as if you want to go the left side, grab Soaring Shields into like Bulwark. I think those are, generally speaking, going to be about the same offensively and defensively. It's just a matter of which one do you prefer. At least, fingers crossed, that's what I hope.
Yeah.
I do think that the middle of the tree is bloated. The other thing that I would like to see is there's a ton of talents that impact judgment that probably don't need to exist as talents. They can just make it judgment.
Yes, that I agree with, and I think that is like something that's very awkward because there's so much stuff that has been baseline with judgment for many years that having to pick a talent for it feels clunky.
Yeah, like if they took judgment in the tree, in the paladin tree, and then the improved judgment with the 25% increased damage and Crusader's judgment and just baked it into judgment baseline, I think that saves a lot of points I think that makes judgment, like, it very clearly becomes the number one priority in almost any situation to use because you gain so much value out of it. But also it frees up the talent trees in both cases so that you can go find more interesting things. So
agreed. And right now, I know I had posts on the alpha forums that did get a blue post, but they did talk about Divine Toll. They said it's for because Divine Toll isn't generating resources. They said as for Divine Toll, part of what has made the ability fun and impactful is this flood of resources. We're exploring ideas for how to reincorporate this in a future version of this ability. And I think that is very good. And I think that if they add the resources back into Divine Toll and not necessarily Avenger's Shield, it definitely brings its priority up in Mythic Plus infinitely, because being able to just on demand every minute have the influx of instant 5 holy power going into a pool, or even if you cast it at the end of a pool and you're going into like a tyrannical boss, you can have 5 holy power going into the next pool.
Yeah, I do think if they do that though, I think it's gonna lead to a lot of cries to just bring the holy power back to Avenger's Shield, because it's like these shields generate holy power but these don't, and so it, you know, I agree with that sentiment honestly, because it's like it kind of can confuse new players to the spec. Like, okay, why does throwing 5 shields at once give me this holy power, but throwing this 1 shield doesn't? Like, I think it's a tightrope that has to be walked very, very carefully, and I'm not confident they're going to be able to do it, because I think long term they're just going to relent and give Avenger's Shield back, and then Shield of the Righteous probably gets nerfed as a result, because they want to kind of keep that power away from the shield, which, like I said, if they do everything else around it well enough, then I'm okay with that. But yeah, it's gonna, I think this is going to be, of the 3 tank specs that we have out right now, I think this is going to be the most interesting one to watch kind of moving forward into the alpha cycle.
I agree, and it's just a shame because Divine Toll is such a satisfying ability. I absolutely love pressing that button every time it is up, and to see it in its current state on the alpha and it be an ability you don't feel like you need to have feels bad, because it was just like, I look fun. Like, I remember like playing it, you know, for the first time in beta and hitting it and seeing my holy power bar go full. I can Shield of the Righteous, and I get my free spenders from that, and it just, there was so much power tied in that ability, and to rip that power out and not even take it, to me it's an iconic ability to Prot Paladin, and it's not worth taking.
I would argue it's iconic to Paladin in general at this point, but yeah, right now it's not worth taking. But if they do the resource flood again, then I think it starts to tiptoe back to when do you just make the holy power generation the same way that it was and go from there. But
okay, overall... so hear me out. Hear me out. So what if if you just take Divine Toll, right? Like, you get the silence, you get the interrupt, and that's just the base ability, right?
Yeah.
But let's say you take Improved Sarah and Divine Toll. You take Improved Sarah and Divine Toll, instead of it being the cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds, you give Divine Toll the resource generation. So you still only have it once a minute, and you don't get the CDR on it, but you get resources instead, and that is Improved Divine Toll.
I think that's actually an interesting choice, honestly, because particularly in this choice node, because you get, hey, do you get a flood of resources, or do you just get extra damage because you're going to cast 3 extra Avenger shields that bounce? And with like Soaring Shield, you're just going to bounce to like 6 or 7 targets potentially. So like, I think that's an interesting choice of, do you do the resources to get more defensive, or do you take Divine Resonant and get more damage? And I think that's
especially once the silence and interrupt is working. Yeah. Because you could be in a dungeon where that there are going to be pulls where you're pulling big and you're going to need to interrupt a lot of casts all at once, right? So like take some of the pulls that you do in halls right now, where you have multiple things casting all at once, or like the last section before Solea in Gambit, right? Like you're doing big pulls, everything's casting, and that is where like divine pull would be mandatory for pulls like that. And then at that point, right, at the key level you're doing, or maybe the affixes, you look, do I need the extra defensive resources? Well, no, it's a tyrannical week. I just need the interrupt, and I need more consistent interrupts. So let me take Divine Resonance. So anytime I cast Divine Toll, it will give you the Divine Resonance, where you're still echoing the shields afterwards, and you're getting those extra interrupts out on those big packs, or maybe you're doing MDI style pulls, right, and you need that extra resources, so you take the improved Divine Toll and you get the huge flood of abilities while you're setting up a pull.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think that makes that bottom talent choice, the capstone talent, a lot more interesting than what it is, because like right now I just think you take Divine Resonance all the time, but if you had the choice between improved DT being 5 holy power when you use Divine Toll versus extra Avenger shields just in general, I think that's a much more interesting choice. So yeah, I like it.
It makes it Wake of Ashes.
Yeah, basically, which I love Wake of Ashes personally as a player that's playing a lot of Brett. That is such a fun ability. Anyways, we'll move on now to Druid. Kind of take I think the consensus worst tank of the 3 that are out right now, and kind of talk about it. Now I know you haven't played a ton of Druid. You've basically leveled 1 to 60 and have left it alone, whereas I've been playing a lot of Guardian recently, so I think I probably am a bit more comfortable kind of talking about this one. But generally speaking, what are your opinions generally speaking about Guardian Druid? I know you probably haven't messed with it at all, but like just based off of your review of the talents and maybe watching other content creators, what's your opinion on Guardian?
I know Dark Mech is actually very high on Druid. He thinks it might be the best tank of the 3 on Alpha, from, if I remember correctly, from a stream the other night. But I think Disco Bear, like where you're building around Galactic Guardian and putting a lot of power into Moonfire, it seems like fun gameplay, right? Like you're going around, you're trying to dot everything, and that's going to help you do damage. But speaking on Druids is really tough. It's one that has actually piqued my interest in Classic the most, like Vanilla and TBC, because of how good it is in Season of Mastery and in TBC. But I've never put a lot of time into it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it should be more about shape-shifting and playing into that class fantasy, and don't really do that. And right now it's just it is by far the weakest tank of 6 in retail.
Yeah, when all of your power is built to do a 3-minute cooldown, that's not good tech design, frankly. Like I think it's fine for DPS to be like very heavily reliant on their cooldown. Fire Mage is like the premier example of that, to a lesser extent right now, Destrolock with Infernal. But like, and I think that's fine for those specs, because then it's like you can play around these pockets of burst and then you just have whatever damage afterwards. For tanks, like that's not good design, because you need to be able to live the whole time, and if you can only live for 30 seconds every 3 minutes, like that's just bad. Like it feels really good like if you just close your eyes and pretend like nothing else in the dungeon is gonna happen except for when you play Incarn. Like in that vacuum it feels really good, but you don't play in that vacuum. So as far as the Druid tree build goes, I think for me I'd go something like this for Mythic Plus. I do like that they took this improved bark skin talent, dropped it to a point, and just made it the 4 seconds. That is a positive change just in general for the Druid tree. But like I'd go probably this route. Get removed corruption because you'll need it. The new Resto passive that is actually better for Bear than it is for Resto. Tee. Let's see. Grab Skull Bash. Get Wild Charge, of course. I'm so happy that you can get Wild Charge and not have to fight with Renewal. and then grab Incap Roar, 2 points here, Ursol's Innervate into Nature's Vigil, and you still have, you know, a point to spend wherever the heck you want. I'd probably throw it into Ursine Vigor just to get that little bit of extra DR going into bear form, because that's like Bear Druid traditionally has had the same issue that Blood DK had for a long time, where if you didn't have Rage or Bone Shield charges up from the previous pull, you just flopped when you went into a pack.
Yeah.
Ursine Vigor, I think, helps cover a little bit of that, because, you know, 10% health, 10% armor for 4 seconds. Like, that's pretty much all you need to get started. Innervate is going to be interesting, because I think it's going to wholly, like, for Mythic, I think for Raid, it's fantastic. For Mythic Plus, it's going to completely rely on what is the seasonal affix, because if they do things like they've done with Shadowlands, where aspects of every seasonal affix gave mana regen to healers, then I think Innervate loses a lot of value.
It has a ton of value in Raid, though, because that goes out all the time.
Yeah, on cooldown, and with this priest and Mistweaver monks in particular begging for them. So, but what are your thoughts on, like, the class tree side of things? Like, I know there's builds where you can, like, you know, what they call beatboxing, where you go the Moonkin side of things, or you go the Feral side of things, so when you're not actively tanking, you shift into cat form and do damage. But I tend to want to play safer on my Guardian Druid, because you just never know with them.
Yeah.
So,
I think in Raid that's really good, being able to shapeshift and, you know, use that Druid utility. It plays into the class fantasy. And really it's flavor that you've had going all the way back to vanilla, when Feral and Guardian were the same class tree, where you would put points into it so you had enough points so you would live while you were off tanking. But then when it was the Prot Warrior's turn and the Prot Warrior was tanking, you were just ripping on damage, and you were just, you know, you were just slamming that boss, which to me feels really good. And that is like something about tanking I enjoy, is trying to find that right balance for the situation, where, you know, there are some raid fights, like, you know, like Rygalon is just white knuckle driving. Like, that boss is slapping us around for the entire 5-6 minutes, right? Or whatever, however long that fight is.
and it's my favorite fight in the dungeon or in the raid for a reason.
Me too. And it's the same reason why Sludge Fist is my favorite encounter in all of Shadowlands.
Yeah.
And so the ability to, you know, you just, especially like those hard DPS checks, right? Like, imagine a Guardian Druid, right? Like, they're not, like, I guess Sludge Fist is hard to, like, this wouldn't necessarily work as well on Sludge Fist, because you're taking incredible amounts of damage all the time, because he's hitting both the tanks. But on something like a Rygalon, where you, like, let's say if you're running Blood DK and you're running Guardian Druid, Blood DK parry the corrupted wounds, like the tank swap mechanic, and so you can go a good amount of time without needing to tank swap, especially with the throughput of healing that Blood DK has. They're able to, like, you know, you can AMS damage, you can AMZ the damage from the dots, you can just heal through it, you can parry when he does it, so you don't even get the stacks. So that would really give something like a Guardian Druid that can shift into cat form, and it had cooldowns that it could use around it. Like, you just go in there and you just absolutely rip on that boss, and then when it's your turn, you just swap back to bear form, you get your extra 10% DR. Bada bing, bada boom, right?
Right, yeah. So I just made a, like, Guardian Feral hybrid build that, for me, I'm thinking, honestly, Jailer. Like, a fight design like that, where you're tank swapping in the first 2 phases, but, like, you go decent chunk of time where Fear actually is useful, even though I think it should be moved out of this spot. You know, you get, you know, you're going to be more than 15 seconds out of bear form. Like, if you start the Jailer fight and say, like, you're on DK and I'm on bear, you know, I will start that fight in cat form. And then when I get into bear form, all of a sudden I can get an Iron Fur up really quickly because nothing costs any rage. And I get the extra armor and health for shifting into the bear form. And then I also get all the benefits of bear as well. And then, like, in phase, like, you give up Innervate, you give up Nature's Vigil, you give up a lot of healing. But in a raid situation, outside of Innervate, I don't think any of it hurts. But, like, for example, like phase 3, when we were doing Jailer kills last night to help some friends get AOTC, I tanked phase 3 solo every time. And so, like, I think that would be a situation where if that were a case where you just go, like, one whole phase where you only need one tank, well, your Guardian Druid can then be a cat and just do cat damage. And, you know, you get just that little bit more oomph of DPS out of it. So, like, I think there's potential for that in Raid. I'm still worried about it in Mythic Plus because it's more about the class tree than it is the spec tree, but I think the spec tree or the class tree rather, for from Guardian's perspective, I think is really good. I think you got some nice options. You can do a more aggressive Feral or Moonkin based build for Raid, and then you also have just go down the healing side and get all this all this healing set up for more healing taken and stuff like that for Mythic Plus. I think this tree setup is quite good.
And I would agree, because it kind of allows you to really tailor between, like, this is what I need to do in Rage, right? Like, you just need enough survivability to live, and then you just do as much damage as you can. And then in Mythic Plus, like, you still need to be able to do damage, but you need to be able to survive. And being able to make those choices where Rage, you go more damage focused, and then, like, you kind of have more of a, okay, I increase the healing I'm taking, I increase the healing I'm doing, but I still do enough damage. Like, that's perfect for Mythic Plus. Like, that's what you want your tank to be able to do between those two flavors of content.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think for the Druid tree, from a Guardian perspective, this thing is like an 8 or a 9 probably for me. I think it's really good for bear, and it gives you some really nice choices. Like, you can pick up, like, remove corruption, go down the Boomkin side to grab, like, Typhoon. You can get an Innervate if you want to go a more Innervate build to be, like, for prog rating. It's probably better to grab an Innervate build, and Nature's Vigil, which, allows you to do that little bit of off healing and stuff. But as you get into farm, you can switch to this cat weaving style. Like, this tree is really nice, and you're not really missing anything you feel like you need. Like, you're getting Iron Fur, you're getting thick hide, you're getting a powerful bark skin, you're getting a good frenzied regen that, like Word of Glory, needs to be off the GCD. You get your stampeding roar, you're getting your versatility in bear form, you get an on-demand heal for yourself, and then you have Heart of the Wild for whatever affinity you're going to switch into. Like, it doesn't feel like you're missing a lot of the required stuff that you need as bear, and the stuff that you are missing, like if you're missing remove corruption or Typhoon, you don't lose a ton of your core bear needs in order to grab it. So I think this tree is great for Guardian. Feral, not so much. For Guardian, I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Guardian is looking to be strong. I think it's looking to be fun, especially having actual choice to make on how you want to play.
Yeah, which is, you said Guardian you think is going to be fun. Guardian and fun hasn't been a term put together about this spec since I've come back in BFA, so
that's why I haven't played it. It's not fun to play.
Yeah. All right, so on the Guardian side of the tree, I think this is a pretty straightforward build. Some flexibility depending on Mythic Plus or raid situations. I'll just kind of show you the build that I would do for Mythic Plus. Trying to remember everything that I grabbed. Oh yeah, gotta grab these talents. These are important. It wasn't that one. It was this one. I think it was along the lines of this. I put too many points somewhere. Oh, it was Earth Warden that I didn't get. It was that. That's kind of like a Mythic Plus build that like leans into Thrash, obviously with Ursox Fury, positive outlook. You know, you want big thrashes, you're getting powerful Moonfires, you get twin Moonfires, so you spread Moonfire. Galactic Guardian, which has always been my favorite talent of Guardians, just because it's fun. You know, you're getting your big Berserk thing, so your cooldown is good. You're getting, you know, the Thrash CDR, you get the haste. The Maul Rage cost doesn't matter that much in Mythic Plus. I think it's actually pretty important in Raid. But 15% more haste, we don't hate that. And then you also get the 50% iron for reduced cost. Like, I think that's probably the only thing I'm kind of sad that we miss out on in this build is getting, well, two things. Elun's favored, getting that, you know, more arcane damage done and that healing, and then also missing out on Guardian of Elun, which I think is good for duration of Iron Fur mainly. But other than that, like, I don't like this version of the tree as much as the original one because I could get all the Moonfire talents and it was great. But this version of the tree I still think needs a little bit of work, and like something like Infected Wounds is insulting. Like, just make it baseline of those two spells.
Yeah.
And move on. But like, what are your thoughts on the Guardian tree? Like I said, I'm not as high on this version as I was the original, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's hard because I haven't played as much. I just know that Galactic Guardian feels good. I know that putting the power in the Moonfire is always. Everyone loved Legion Guardian Druid, right? Where it was that's why it's called Skill Bearer, right? And if there is a time when something felt good and we can get back to that, I will never say no.
Yeah, I think the bottom of the tree is a little bit lacking for choice in some ways. Like this one, I've never been a Survival of the Fittest fan. It used to kind of be, they switched where Guardian of Elun and After the Wildfire choice node with Survival of the Fittest. Like, I'm not the biggest Survival of the Fittest fan. I just don't think, like, the cooldown reduction on Bark Skin is fine, but getting Survival Instincts cut off by 30%, it's like, great, your 3-minute cooldown is now like 2 minutes and 45 seconds or something stupid like that. Like, I've never understood it for that purpose. I would have liked to have them put it back here to where I could get Guardian of Elun and then have the choice of Survival of the Fittest at one point, but they decided to go different pathing with that. But other than that, like, Circle of Life and Death, not very good. Convoke was never really all that good. Incarn, a lot of the stuff that makes Incarn strong is now just in the Berserk talents. And then, of course, this lovely tooltip is just not good in general, I don't think. Like, oh, you get more chances to pulverize. Pulverize is overrated in my opinion. So I think the bottom of the tree probably needs a little work. And this middle tree, like, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 talents on one row. Like, that feels like too much. So, but generally speaking, like, the other thing that I think they tried to do with this tree is they tried to make Maul more impactful, which I am down for. I just wish Maul had synergy with something else in the kit, like baseline. Because, like, that's kind of always also been the biggest complaint about Guardian, is that there's very little synergy within the kit. Like, I think I sat down with my brothers and compared, like, here's everything in Brewmaster's kit, and here's how it interacts with, like, 2 or 3 different things. Like, Keg Smash gives you Shuffle, Celestial Brew cooldown, Fortifying Brew cooldown, Purifying Brew cooldown, and then you have, like, Blackout Kick that gives you Shuffle, you have Spinning Crane Kick that gives you Shuffle, you have Tiger Palm that reduces brews. Like, almost every baseline ability inside the Guardian kit does something, or in the Brewmaster kit does something with something else. The only interaction in the base Bear Druid kit is that Mangle does more damage when there's a Thrash on the target, and that's it. Like, everything else just feels kind of bolted on. So I'd like to see them do something with the baseline kit, maybe make them all interactive with something else, even if it's with Thrash or, like, you know, or even Moonfire. But I think that adds a lot of fun and, like, keeps the floor of Guardian being one of the easier tanks to get into pretty consistent. But then you have high level Guardian players, say Dark Mech or Pumps, can take these little intricacies that they could build into the kit itself and figure out how to maximize it. I think that and tweaking this tree a little bit better to make some of these middle talents feel better to choose, I think could turn Guardian into a very much a powerhouse. Would you agree with that? In terms of, especially the base kit thing, because I think I'm out on a limb when I say that, and people think I'm strange.
No, I do agree with that. Sorry, I didn't realize I was still muted.
No worries. So overall, like with Guardian, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rate in this tree right now?
I do agree a little bit. Can be lackluster, but I think it is still overall strong, so I'll probably give it like a 7.
See, we're the opposite on this. I was more bullish on the Prot Paladin tree than you were. You're more bullish on this tree than I am. I'm only giving it a 5. I really don't like I really want to be able to lean into Moonfire, and the fact that they split these two talents and these two talents up and made it impossible, it feels like, to get all 4, I think is big sad. You know, Ursoc, may he rest in peace, is weeping somewhere about it. But like, the middle of this tree just feels like you're going out of your way to like skip too many things. Because like, reinforced for like layered main, I think would be really good if they brought the Azurite trait aspect of it back, where it gave you agility. But like, that
would be nice, yeah.
But other than that, like, this doesn't feel good. Like, you can't even get your second charge of Survival Instinct because there's just too much in the tree that you need to get. Ursoc's Endurance isn't very good. Infected Wounds is insulting. Like, even Earth Warden is really good. It's one of your biggest, like, healing, because it's, you know, it's damage reduction that counts on the healing meters. It's one of your biggest heals, quote unquote. But like, Vicious Cycle doesn't feel good. Front of the pack is fine. It's just kind of out of the way. And like, Reinforced Furs, like, there's just too many talents here that just feel like they're pretty worthless, and they get in the way of the tree feeling really nice. So that's why I'm only giving it a 5, because again, I like the ideas in here. I really appreciate Rage of the Sleeper being back. I know that's the old artifact trait, but you know, getting a 25% DR for 10 seconds on a 1.5 minute cooldown on top of Bark Skin and Survival Instincts, like, I'm not upset about that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to Death Knight now. The spec you've played the most of this expansion, I think. Mainly because it's broken as hell, and you have Jailer Gavel.
Yeah, I played it a lot this pat.
We both played a lot of Death Knight just for different reasons. You and I could probably do a whole video on Death Knight, like all the specs in general, but we'll just focus on Blood for this time. Speaking from a Death Knight tree perspective, your thoughts on this tree for Blood DK?
I think it's really awkward having to talent both into Death's Advance and Wraithwalk. You know, not having Death's Advance baseline is really awkward in my opinion. But I think that, because like, you're going to have to take one or the other, like, it's required, hands down. So like, it kind of eliminates Death Pact, which I'm not a really big fan of that talent to begin with. But I do like Anti-Magic Barrier, reduces the cooldown of Anti-Magic Shell by 20 seconds. It increases its duration and the amount absorbed by 40%. I mean, that's just, I would like to have a better choice between movement and better defensive. Right? Like if I... Yeah. Like, it'd be one thing if I was picking between Death's Advance and Wraithwalk, and like Anti-Magic Barrier and Anti-Magic Zone. Like, yeah, picking like between those, I feel like is more equal. Whereas I'm always going to want to have Death's Advance because I might not always want Wraithwalk.
That is true. Yeah, DPS DKs always want Wraithwalk too, but your blood, yeah, like there's definitely times where Wraithwalk doesn't really feel like it has a ton of value for whatever reason. I agree with Death's Advance. All 3 specs, it is like their lifeblood of mobility. Like I don't see a reason. Like it is very easy to get. Like you're only investing, 3 points as DPS to get it. Basically 2 points for blood. But I think because it is something that all 3 specs are going to get 99 to 100% of the time, it probably should just be a baseline, because you're right, it does limit choice at the top of this tree. I would argue that with the other 2 sides too, but that's for another conversation. But yeah, like taking Death's Advance, making it baseline, and then moving Anti-Magic Barrier here, but keeping its connection points to Veteran and to Suppression, I think makes, doing something similar on both sides if they really need the similarity, I think opens up some really interesting choices, particularly in the bottom of the tree where I think this tree kind of shines. So.
Oh yeah, the bottom of this tree is incredible. So, and this is mostly just kind of playing off of how I like Blood DK to feel. I do like power being in Dancing Rune Weapon, and this, and I really like Abomination's Limb. I've been playing with it a lot more lately, and it feels a lot degenerate to play in Mythic Plus than Shackle the Unworthy. And it's just such a good DPS cooldown and utility for Raid and Mythic Plus. So I feel like Abomination Limb is required.
Except when you're not grouping your friends with Spiteful.
Yeah. So
just a quick story. Quick story time on that. So Brew was running keys on his DK last night as of this recording, this conversation, so July 27th, and he had A-bomb limb going at, and it was still going after a pack, and it pulled the Spiteful right on top of one of his DPS and killed him, or nearly killed him.
No, it one-shot him.
Oh, it one-shot him. That's fantastic. So yeah, quick story time on that. So for your perspective here, are you going down the... Oh wait, I just like completely messed up your build. This was your tree. Hang on, I'm gonna fix it. Thinking I was still on like the empty tree. There we go. Okay, so some questions that I have, particularly about the top of the tree. Why Sacrificial Pact but not Control Undead?
I like Sacrificial Pact. It's I have actually used it I've used it for aggro, I've used it for burst healing, and like I've gotten good use out of it. I think you probably could go Control Undead depending on the dungeon, but from the 3 dungeons that I've done so far, I don't see a lot of things for me to control.
Yeah, if there's like a Theater of Pain Captain style mob, I guess that's where Control Undead. Yeah, Sacrificial Pact, especially since as Blood, your ghoul's only going to be a minute long. You time it to where at like 59 seconds you explode it.
Yeah, and there are times, and there have been times where I'll explode it early, right? Like if I'm doing a big pack, I'm having trouble with aggro, ghoul's there in the middle, explode it, it's free aggro, and or I've been in, I played bad, I'm in a bad spot, it gives me a first 25% heal to allow me to recover.
Yeah. So I'm kind of looking over your tree, and it's much different than what I would be building. I'm glad you took Runic Empowerment and not Runic Corruption, because Runic Empowerment is just better.
Yeah. No, I strongly agree with that. I really like Runic Attention. I think Icy Talons is really good. I mean, Blood DK does a lot of damage from its melees because it's a 2-handed strength weapon, and then Empower
Bloodworms.
Rune Weapon. Yeah.
So question with Icy Talent. So it does, like, I know it just says requires Death Knight Frost in its tooltip, but it does work, I'm assuming, across all 3 specs. Like if you Death Strike, you're getting 6% melee attack speed, right?
I thought it did, but the thing is, Empower Rune Weapon is really good. Like, it is really good. Like, you get 15% haste and generating 1 rune and 5 runic power instantly every 5 seconds for 20 seconds, right? Like, imagine popping Dancing Rune Weapon, right? And you still want it with Everlasting Bond, you still want to keep that up as much as you can. And having more haste and 1 rune and runic power, like, okay, runic power, if you take like Insatiable Blade and Everlasting Bond, you're not really worried about runic power. You're over capping on it like you are now. And more haste, faster rune recharge, free rune recharge every 5 seconds for 20 seconds. You know, that's more heart strikes that are going out. And I mean, honestly, like, if you're spending heart strikes, your runes on CD while you're waiting for them to come back, you death strike. Because I think that was like a really good change that they made to Everlasting Bond to allow heart strike and death strike increase their duration of Dancing Rune Weapon, which makes it feel like less like heart strike spam. And you want to find good places to death strike in that rotation to keep it going. That way you're not picking between, do I heart strike to keep this going, or do I death strike so my healer doesn't have to heal me?
Yeah.
I know it does say requires frost, but I'd want to test it in alpha, make sure that is not the case.
Yeah, let me know, because I'm very curious, because I did an unholy dive, looking into the unholy tree, and I think it was right before they announced all the cooldown changes they were doing for unholy, so kind of made that video moot. But I was like, if Icy Talons works on like Death Coil and Epidemic and Death Strike and stuff, like, then it becomes one of the better DPS talents period in the tree for all specs. And it takes something like improved Death Strike for the DPS specs and kind of makes it moot, you know, because, you know, at least for Unholy Bond is like ridiculous for them, you know. So I was just curious about that. So it's funny, like, I definitely understand about the Empower Rune Weapon. I want to humor me real quick with a single target build as soon as I can get this to come up. So I was messing around with this idea. We'll just grab Death's Reach, because why not? And then just grab a few more talents just to get down this tree. Of course, you gotta get Runic Empowerment. Let's see, I got 2 points. I was thinking something like this for like pure single target, where you can get execute damage as a tank, which, you know, right now that's limited to warrior. And then it's not great,
and
but
Paladin has
with Hammer of Wrath.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So like giving another tank like execute, plus you still get the empowered rune weapon, getting the strength bonus from rune mastery, which is a talent I think is sneakily really good. You know, you still get a lot of majority of the defensive benefits, plus Will in the Necropolis, which has been like stellar for so long. Like, you have to get some stuff that might not be great, like Sacrificial Pact, you know, that can be traded out. But like Brittle is a little bit more damage because you get 1 disease. You know, you have to pick some stuff here in the middle, which is kind of like 5% death in haste and death and decay. Not bad for blood, but not great. You know, and then you can make the choice. Like, you could get Will in the Necropolis, or if you need the utility, you can get Death's Echo. But like, I just really like this idea in single target. So like a fight like Rygalon, where we don't need to gather up a bunch of ads, like that is kind of pure single target with some ability, or like Skull-X, stuff like that, where like this build I think would be really interesting to try out.
Yeah, that actually I do like having the execute. That would be really strong. I think if you're doing a single target build, you probably forego Death's Reach, and you take Lichborn instead, because on a fight like that, right, like think like Rygolon, like the extra leech is going to make a lot more sense. Or and then
Sure.
for control undead, you probably take Enfeeble instead, because I mean that fights like that hit like trucks. Yeah, you want to heal through it, but you also don't want to go to 100 to 0. And so like even like at that point your ghoul becomes a 15% DR. I mean it I don't like the RNG in it. It has a chance to do that, but I mean it's still really nice because it's giving, I mean it's up for a minute, 6 seconds. I mean, so like, I mean, if you hit the lottery, right, like you just have 15% DR for a minute, right?
Yeah, plus big strength gains from Runeforge effects, because unless they buff like Stone Skin Gargoyle or some of the other ones, you're still probably running Fallen Crusader in every and all situations. Right now it's 15% strength. You add another 30% effectiveness, you're getting 18% strength plus a bigger heal when it procs. Like,
yeah.
And then between that and Rune Mastery, like plus the strength from Might of Thessarian, like there's just strength boosts all over this type of build that, you know, combined with some other stuff in the spec tree, I think makes for a very, very interesting single target setup that I'd be. And if there's another weapon like Gavel out there, maybe not as crazy as that weapon is, but there's something else along those lines that has like some interesting procs that deal more damage that scale off of strength, like I don't think people will complain about blood DK damage.
No, there's that, and if you look at my original build, you could probably do things like get rid of like permafrost and runic intention to allow you to still get rune mastery and horn of winter, which just kind of also feeds into keeping dancing rune weapon up, which there's a lot of. Yeah, so get rid of Runic Attention there, and then you get rid of Permafrost, and then you're able to grab Rune Mastery and Horn of Winter. And that Horn, you're not getting like the free Runic power, which is okay, but you have a 45-second on demand. Blow the Horn of Winter. Yeah,
2 runes, 25 Runic power. Plus you get strength from consuming runes, and you're getting runes back from, rune weapon when you have that on a 2-minute charge. Plus you're getting runic empowerment. Like, the rune regeneration possibilities for blood are insane, and that's always been one of my bigger complaints about blood early on, is that it kind of feels rough to play because you just sit there for like 3 and 4 seconds waiting for runes to regen sometimes, especially if you mismanage them. But like with this build, that like just in this class tree, like that is ridiculous. So I agree with overall about some of the awkwardness, but I think this version of the tree is significantly better than the first one that we got. And I think the bottom of this tree, like, you're spoiled for, like, you have to make some tough choices. Like, improved Death Strike, A-Bomb Limb, like, might be useful, but even grabbing like Unholy Bond, or coming down a couple more points to grab Unholy Ground, Unholy Bond, and Death's Echo, to sacrifice like the 3 points here to grab maybe like Blood Draw if you really need the healing, or Soul Reaper. Like, the bottom of this tree is just, I think, really cool, and you can really tailor. I think Empowered Rune Weapon is probably non-negotiable, but like every other talent below the 20 required points, like, there is reason you could find a way to pick it, and I think that's what makes the bottom of this tree really good. The top and the middle are a little awkward. I agree with you on that. And that probably drops my overall rating of this tree for blood down a bit to probably, I would say probably 6 or 7. But
yeah, that's around where I'd put it too.
Yeah. And honestly, it's just the top of it. I think really it's the top of this tree. Like, it just feels very, very cluttered. Like, there's a ton going on, and like I complained with it in the Druid tree, there's 9 talents on the 3rd tier. Like, I know you're not going to take all of them. They're all very situational, but it just makes it look like you have to take more than what you do. And again, from a new player experience, I think that can potentially be confusing. But and there's just going to be talents that you just probably won't see a lot of play, like Blinding Sleep for blood, Permafrost, I think, probably finds its way to get pushed out. Death Pact, you don't play as Blood anyways, because we hate healing absorbs as tanks. But, like, Blood Scent won't get played. AMB probably won't see a ton of play. I just think that there's a lot of talents here that become non-starters, and I think that's why this top of this tree in particular is awkward to me.
Yeah. No, and that's the same problem I have, right? Like, I don't like having to pick between A and B and Disadvance, right? Disadvance wins that fight every single time.
Especially for a class that doesn't already have any built-in mobility. Like, if you had, Demon Hunter or Monk mobility was, Infernal Strike and Glide or, Chi Torpedo Transcendence, okay, maybe we have a conversation. But because Death Knight, all they do is run. They're just a running. It's not a choice.
Yep. I think Blinding Sleet is very good if you can find something you want to give up for it. I think it definitely has value in Mythic Plus, but nowhere else. But you can also bring other classes that, you can bring a Holy Paladin. Oh, look, there's Blinding Light. You can bring Windwalker, which has Leg Sweep. You have, you have a lot of other classes that have AoE stops.
I mean, even DPS DKs have, I think, plenty of room in their trees to drop a point. Like, even I think in this tree for you, like, you could drop Lynchborn for Blinding Sleet if you really needed it. So, like, it's not completely... I think that's, of that 9 talents in the second row, I think Death's Advance is obviously the one that is absolutely mandatory, along with Spirit Drain, giving you the resources, or Anticipation, rather. But beyond that, I think the rest of these are completely optional, and Blinding Sleet is probably the best of these 9, but where do you get the points for it? And I think that's a little disappointing.
Yeah, because, like, I also, like, really do like Unholy Ground, right? Like, that feels good. Like, it gives you, like, the feel of I plant, I sit here, and you get haste, and you love haste, right? Like, it allows you to put more versatility on your gear. But problem with Unholy Ground is, like, what am I giving up to get to it, right?
Yeah, the answer is the cool stuff in the bottom of the tree.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the problem. Like, I'm still going to prioritize haste first, and I don't think I don't think that's going away. So giving up 5% haste while in Death and Decay, okay, like, raid fights, probably going to have to move. Mythic Plus, definitely going to have to move, right? Like, especially early on, there's going to be kiting involved.
Oh, yeah. I hope we don't go full kite meta again, but there's definitely going to be, oh crap, we pulled too much because I overestimated my own abilities, so let's get out of here type situations. Because, I mean, those happen now. So, at good gear, let alone at new gear. So, let's move on to the blood tree itself. And again, I think you and I, very different approaches to the blood tree itself. So you really focused a lot on this left side. You took blood tap to get down into consumption. What's the thought process behind those talents? Because, like, with all the rune regeneration you have in the spec tree, blood tap feels almost like overkill to me.
It is all about that dancing rune weapon uptime. Any way to get runes is good.
Yeah, so you're talking here, and then you grabbed Insatiable Blade, which is the 4-piece tier bonus now. It's 4-piece, right? Where you get the...
No, Insatiable Blade is the Crimson Rune Weapon legendary.
And then
Everlasting Bond is the tier set, except it only does 1 copy instead of 2.
That's probably good, and that probably nerfs that talent in a way that, or nerfs this kind of synergy that you're getting right in here in a way that is probably a little bit not fully understood yet. But, the thing is, like, the middle of the tree, I think you and I are pretty much all in the same boat. For Mythic Plus, I actually think I went a slightly different route. What's your opinion on Foul Bulwark being this high up the tree?
It doesn't bother me, to be honest, because, like, it's something that I'm used to having. So it just being up here to grab is Like, I don't have an issue with it because I want that baseline anyway.
Trying to remember
This is
everything
not
that it took. I don't think it took that talent. I think that was my build, and then I have 1 point left. So I think I did grab Leeching Strike. Either Leeching Strike or Reinforced Bones, depending on offensive or defensive need. So I think this was kind of the build that I had, where we both agree Everlasting Bond, like that gameplay is still going to be very, very important. You kind of went into like rapid decomp to do more, you know, D&D focus with Shattering Bone, which I think is probably one of the better offensive talents in this entire tree, but unfortunately it's tied to an ability that probably won't be seen that much play, because I think Unquenchable Thirst with Red Thirst synergy is just really good. So I think we took two different approaches, but a lot of things we agree on.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so Falve Bulwark isn't baseline. You have to, in retail, you're taking Blood Tap over it, which I think is fine. But I mean, I'm never gonna say no to more maximum HP, because that is less likely for me to go 100 to 0.
Yeah, I think because it's not tied or competing with other talents, it's probably good. And it kind of pushes you into a gameplay of, hey, try to keep 10 stacks of Bone Shield as much as possible. Just because 10% HP plus, you know, you get into 6% base haste. And if you run Reinforced Bones, you know, 10% armor. Like, there's just some synergies with maintaining high Bone Shield stacks, along with, like, what is it? I'm trying to remember the talent. There's one in here that, oh, it is Shattering Bone. That's what it is. Tombstone and Shattering Bone. Like, some good synergies in there with Bone Shields.
Yeah.
I think on a much more defensive style of play overall, but with the rune regeneration that the spec has, I'm not too concerned. Just out of the base tree, plus the haste from improved Bone Shield, because of course haste helps your rune regeneration. Like, yeah. I just really like this idea with Red Thirst. Obviously, I love Vampiric Blood. I think it's one of the neatest tank cooldowns. It's very simple in its surface, but like, it just feels good when you're like, all right, I'm gonna hit blood, and all of a sudden I'm gonna death strike right after taking this big hit, and I'm gonna heal so much, and it's gonna feel.
Oh yeah,
it feels so nice. And then you get, you know, this Unquenchable Thirst, which I think this is gonna be completely dependent on numbers tuning once it goes in, because like, it depends on what's the X percent, and you know how much of that percentage is it. If it's only like 10 or 20, then I think it's BS and you go either Purgatory or Bone Storm. If it's like 50 or above, then I think this quietly might be like one of the most powerful things. And then if you can just cycle Vampiric Blood on cooldown all the time, like, some chance for some big damage. Some big damage, especially in AoE. So I think both of our builds, I think, have really good value though. Like, you know, you're going for the more kind of almost passive damage approach, where just Bone Shield gets consumed, you do damage, like, and you have Death and Decay synergies with rapid decomp. Yeah, you grabbed Hasty Bargain, I didn't, because I grabbed Leeching Strike instead. But like, it just kind of shows that I think both playstyles that we chose are pretty powerful.
Yeah. And the reason I like this, and I'm actually willing to, like, consumption's good. Like, it's fun to play with. It was everyone, you know, we liked it in Legion, right? So with this, the biggest thing is like your Insatiable Blade, right? So if you go to so Ossuary doesn't matter.
Not anymore, no.
Right? Because like, you have so much runic power from your Dancing Rune Weapon uptime having. Oh no, you're right. It's so no, you will have two, because it's one additional copy. So your Dancing Rune Weapon generates. So you will have two weapons up. So I think that's fine. But you want your Bone Shields to be consumed. because it reduces the cooldown of Dancing Rune Weapon, so having them passively do damage is good, right? And even though I'm not taking the talents to like, so you do have like the cleave, right? So you do like every DK is used to that, standing, death and decay, and cleaving. I think that's great. And even though I'm not taking Heartbreaker, okay, I'm not worried about more cleave because I'm getting it passively class tree and Bone Shield, reducing the cooldown of of Dancing Rune Weapon, and it being tripled while I'm standing in Death and Decay. Like, that is a lot of free damage that I'm getting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, faster ticks on Blood Plague and Death and Decay, plus 50% more health leached on your Blood Plague. Like, Blood Plague is not a huge amount of healing in a vacuum, but like, anytime you can increase your self healing between rapid decomp, you picked voraciousness to get the extra leech. I took bloodworms because I love bloodworms. It's kind of funny to hear the squishing sound when they die. Always amuses
that I do.
me.
It is satisfying. It is satisfying.
You know, plus you got, of course, Vamp Blood. You got of course, Death Strike. Plus you took improved Death Strike in your build to get, you know, 60% more healing on your DS. Like, you know, plus consumption, which does 150% of the healing, 150% of the damage that you dealt is healing. So like, there's a ton of sustain built in. So like, I think for you, this build focusing on having Dancing Rune Weapon up as much as possible, but when it's not up, you're bleeding Bone Shield charges, you're getting value out of it. Like, I think that's a very valid play style that I think works honestly in both Mythic Plus and in Raid. Like, I think I can see it working. And and then like with my build, a lot of sustain built into it as well, big absorb with Tombstone. I'm focused on basically doing more cooldown rotation, so I'm not losing as much. Like, when I lose Bone Shield charges, I'm not getting that passive damage, but I'm rotating my Dancing Rune Weapon with Vamp Blood, and like, if they line up well enough, like, I'm always going to have a defensive up, which means I'm always going to be even harder to kill. So your build is definitely more aggressive than mine, but I tend to pick builds that are a little bit more defensive in nature, because I'm someone that's like cautious and then gets comfortable and says, okay, let's drop XYZ thing and then go. Whereas as long as I've known you and done dungeons with you, you're like, fuck it, let's see how much damage I can do, and then if I need more defensives, we'll do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's just like from having to compete in like tournaments, right? Like,
yeah,
sitting there and like looking at, so the way the Keystone Builders tournament worked, for those who don't know, you have 2 hours of in-dungeon time to build up a key from a +2. So like, let's say your +2 takes 2 minutes, or let's say your +2 key takes 7 minutes and 34 seconds, right? That is out of your 2 hours, and then you go to the next key and you want to do as like, push the key up as high as you can in that time, and then like, depending on how high you can push your key in that 2 hour time span, you know, going over, if you can still do that level of key in a certain amount of time, still benefits you, because there's penalties for going over the 2 hours. But like, I remember when I played, I won't talk about the season 2 because I didn't play very great. It was just a rough experience with one of our players losing power and having to split up our runs. You know, mental was trash, and it was just really awful affixes. It was fortified sanguine necrotic, and that was just not fun to play. But
God. I'm triggered.
Yeah, but season 1, right? In season 1, I ended up playing, I think up until we hit like 14s and 15s, I played like Spirit Bomb. Yeah, I'd played the Spirit Bomb build and Collective Anguish for that tournament, just for the raw damage we were able to to put out as a group, because I think we ran Vengeance, Fury Warrior, Holy Paladin, BM Hunter, and why can't I remember what my one friend played? I can't remember what she played in that tournament. But all I know is we absolutely disrespected Hakar. We hit Hakar. It was a good week. It was fortified bursting volcanic. And we hit Ashen Hallow. Holy Paladin was top damage, and we killed Hakar in a 15 DOS in 24 seconds.
That is amazing.
It was absolutely disgusting. And being able to make choices like, okay, I'm playing Collective Anguish and Spirit Bomb until I know I need Fiery Brand or the Fiery Brand build to just live. You know, it felt good because it still enabled, like, I could do really big pulls and do lots of damage and sustain myself, and then I'd go into like the harder keys and we still have to do these pulls, but I need a way to survive and kind of play around that. And so that's why it's just like I've learned to always lean towards damage, because you can always tend to find a way to survive as a tank. And sometimes the answer is you give up damage, but you won't go until you try.
Yeah, the thing is, like, again, this is, I think, a fun way to kind of see the difference between you and I. Like, I tend to be a little bit more conservative, and then as I get comfortable, I start doing my experimentation, you know, because I've not done a tournament play where I'm on a time clock. Usually it's, you know, the only time clock is how long is the patch, which, I mean, Shadowlands meant I had all the time in the freaking world, you know, but hopefully that's not the case in Shadowlands. But, like, even my builds made me successful. Like, it might have taken me a little bit longer to get some things done, but it allowed me to do other things, like learn different aspects of the dungeons, especially as someone that's still, I mean, in reality, I've only been tanking for like 2.5 years, maybe 3 years at this point. So, like, compared to some other folks like yourself and many others, like, I'm still a baby at it, and I'm still learning things every time. Like, I didn't know you could taunt casters and they would just run to you until like 3 weeks ago. You know, so, like, I think there's good value in both of the approaches. It just kind of depends on, like, the comfort level. I think for people that have never tanked before, my approach is probably safer so that they can get comfortable. But if you've done tanking in, like, either other MMOs, or if you're a DPS player that's been around a while and you're like, hey, I'm going to be a tank this tier or whatever, your approach, I think, is also very, very valid, because, like, both of them work. It just kind of depends on, like, I guess, personality of how you view tanking. So very just a very cool, like, you know, you and I are co-tanks in a raid, and yet we view tanking with the same end goal, but our methods of getting there are very different. I think that's really interesting to see.
Oh yeah, and like if you look at a lot of the top end tanks, right? Like, look at Lighty, Darky, whatever you want to call him. Right? I know he didn't take this last World First race, but you look at them: Mirez from Echo, Scott from Echo, Max, or
Divine.
Divine. Who is it? Skylark,
yeah.
Like, they're all DPS players that have gone tank, and so, like, watching them has also kind of, like, shifted my mindset, especially Max. Like watching a lot of Max's takes on tanks is Max is very much the DPS oriented, like, just do enough to live because we need the damage to kill the boss. And that is just kind of how I view things. I used to be very conservative and be like, I will never die, right? But that, you know, I may have lived, but I didn't and this is like my personal take, like, I feel like I did not contribute to the kill if I went all defensive, and, you know, if I could have, you know, done 2k more damage and, you know, it helped us kill the boss, and that's worth it rather than my comfort. But I like being I like being pushed out of my comfort zone and being challenged.
Oh, I agree with that. Like I've been shifting more into like your side of things too, as I've gotten more and more experience as I learn, especially with Monk, because I'm super comfortable with it now. I'm just like, I am way less afraid to limit test myself in a lot of different ways now than I was even like a year ago, where I was just like, oh, I'm doing 15 for the first time. Like, I need to make sure I live this. And now I'm like, oh, I'm doing an 18 first. All right, how much damage can I do? You know, or I'm doing a 20 for the first time. How much damage can I push, or how much can I pull to help everyone else do better damage? Because like for me, I don't care. I know my damage is important, but I'm not focused on it first. I would much rather be like, all right, how much can I pull so that my DPS can have the most fun? You know, because I've always joked, like, you know, my only job is to get hit in the face for a living in this game. You know, and that's really what it is, when you break it down to like its barest form. But I've definitely been shifting more like, all right, how can I push out an extra 500 DPS in this dungeon, or how can I push out, you know, a little bit more damage here, a little bit more damage there. You know, like when I'm off tanking, I still have a habit to push like purifying brew, and luckily it doesn't go off because I have no stagger. But like that's a like even something as simple as like that's a key press that I could have been using instead on Tiger Palm or on Blackout Kick that would have allowed me to get that extra global of damage, that instead I was trying to hit purifying brew out of like a silly habit. So like, yeah, I've been shifting my mindset, but I think especially if I'm playing a new tank, my first tendency is to be conservative. And then as I get more comfortable, I'm like, all right, let's push everything. So, all right. So
Yeah.
we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap up, since I meant this be 90 minutes and we've been at this for almost over 2 hours. Sorry, everyone. But let's look at the 3 specs that haven't been released yet. And obviously don't need to go into much detail because we don't know a ton yet. What are like maybe 1 or 2 things that you want to see from each of the 3 tank specs that are remaining? So that's Vengeance, Prot Warrior, and of course Brewmaster Monk. We'll start with Vengeance because you are obviously super experienced in that spec. What are some things that you want to see, like 2 or 3 things that you want to see carry over to Dragonflight talents?
The biggest thing for me for Vengeance is I know Havoc has the Hunt. For me, I want Elysian Decree to stay, or at minimum, I want a talent that upgrades Sigil of Flame to do Elysian Decree damage and Soul Shard generation. Because right now, in the state that Sigil of Flame is tuned, you use it to get aggro on a pack. Like if you're combining packs together, like you throw Sigil of Flame over there, you'll throw Glaive there, you'll taunt this one mob, and you bring them together, right? And aside from that, you never press Sigil of Flame. Like you only press Elysian Decree. Especially in like raid, like you end up running Raz Defilement, you get a lot of Sigil CDR, so like you don't want to even press Sigil of Flame because you want that CDR to go on Elysian Decree. So to me, I want, you know, that's a whole spell in my toolkit that, you know, like there's a talent based around it for Infernal Strike, where you use Infernal Strike for damage. I still do that even though I don't take Abyssal Strike. But even if it was just like keep the dot mechanic in it and make it like worthwhile and meaningful to press, I think that is very good. And I am also a big fan of the gameplay loop of right now of getting more fel dev uptime, which means more meta uptime. So like I would like to see maybe a talent for the tier set bonus of me consuming souls reduces the cooldown of Immolation Aura and fel devastation. And like it can even be tiered, right? Like I put 1 in and it gives me Immolation Aura, put 2 in, it gives me fel devastation. But anything that has the ability to give me more meta uptime is great, because I don't ever expect them to give me the option of Vision of Perfection and Gluttony again, or I have absurd uptime, but it's all RNG.
Yeah, Demon Hunter is definitely a spec that kind of like Paladin. If it doesn't have its main mitigation up, it just kind of falls over. The difference between Paladin and Demon Hunter is that Paladin allegedly is supposed to have cooldowns to offset that time. Demon Hunter can just jump away, or heal it. I would agree with you on Elysian Decree. I'd like to see that in the Vengeance tree. I think it's now become too important, or like you said, a talent that turns Flame Strike into Elysian Decree essentially. I think it's too important to the Vengeance kit at this point, especially for a class that doesn't have a ton of history to draw back off of. I think those are going to be really interesting trees. In general, Demon Hunter tree, I think it's going to be really interesting to see because they only have what essentially amounts to like 5.5 years worth of stuff to pull from.
Yeah.
I want to see Spirit Bomb be the first talent in the Vengeance tree.
As much as I would love that, it's going to be Soul Cleave.
Oh, I know. But it should be Spirit Bomb, and Soul Cleave should just not be a thing anymore. I think Spirit Bomb should be your pain, pain or fury spender, or whatever it is now. Like, that be your fury dump. Even if you have to cap the number of souls, instead of being like consume up to 5, maybe it only consumes up to 3 or something. But which I know would hurt the healing, but if it's going to be the baseline spender, or at the very least make Soul Cleave and like the very first choice note, the very first talent is a choice note, Soul Cleave for Spirit Bomb.
Yeah, no, I'd be okay with that.
Just troll
the
people.
Other thing, I really want them to get rid of concentrated sigils. That talent is such bait. Like, I like that it makes my sigils do more damage, or have like better effects, right? I absolutely despise that all they did is they just empower your sigils to be more effective, and then it just uses an @player macro. Absolutely despise that.
Yeah, I was actually going to say something about sigils too. Like, I guess my last wish for Vengeance is that Quicken sigils just be baked into all the sigils.
Yeah.
Just let them activate faster. I don't think there's any harm in them activating faster than what they do right now. So that would be my other wish for Vengeance, is give them Elysian Decree. Spirit Bomb needs to be, that one's probably not happening, but Spirit Bomb being like the Fury spender, and then Quicken sigils just be the thing that sigils do baseline. I think those are my 3 wishes for Vengeance.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that, and I just want to see the evolution of like gameplay loops that it's like I play good, therefore I get more meta.
Yeah, I will agree with that too. I love that idea too, because I'm all for, like, I'm generally against CDR in general, but allowing builds that make it so that you get short bursts of your cooldown, I'm actually okay with for some reason. It feels contradictory, but it's just how my brain processes it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do we want to talk Monk next? Since
I was gonna say Warrior. I was gonna say Warrior because it's also the tank I know the least about. Basically, I know a few things that I think I want to see, but
I don't want, like, I like Reprisal in the fact that you have higher shield block up time. I hate Reprisal in the fact that it requires you to use charge and intervene essentially on cooldown, and you lose the utility of it for your basic rotation.
Right.
I think Reprisal is really unhealthy for Prot Warrior. Intervene has a lot of really cool niche uses to help people like live unavoidable mechanics.
Or if they're getting targeted by something specific, like say they're the ones get targeted by like a sinful bolt on a raging 22 fortified obliterator that's just gonna sinful bolt your teammate, all your kicks are down. Well, here I am. Intervene, take some of that damage, and you chill with it and save your teammate that way. I agree. I'm not sure. Like, Reprisal on paper seems like it's really good, but in practice, I think a lot of people I talk to says they feel kind of clunky, despite the fact that Prot Warrior's sneaky good right now. For me, I want Devastator. I want Devastator to be baseline. Like Devastate should not be a button anymore. Just make Devastator the thing for Prot Warriors and go from there. The other thing that I want to see is I want to see them bring back, even if it has to be nerfed, I want to see them bring back the Thunderclap playstyle. Make it an option in the tree. Make it an option in the tree.
I love Thunderclap. Thunderclap is so satisfying to press.
Oh yeah, the limited time I played Prot, and I haven't played Prot Warriors since I did it for video purposes in BFA, but Fires played a lot of it in BFA. And he was just like, he had so much fun with it. He's like, my fingers hurt after, an hour or two of dungeons, but he loved the Thunderclap gameplay. He just said it felt very fluid, very like intuitive. Whereas now it's like you have to play Prot Warrior a while to kind of figure out like how to balance like ignore pain versus shield block, shield bash, and execute, and there's something else. It's escaping me, but like he says it feels a little bit more clunky to play because you're trying to find ways to balance all these things, whereas like the Thunderclap build just it didn't quite play itself, but once you piece together how it's supposed to play, it became very easy to learn. And Prot Warrior now he thinks is not as easy to learn.
Like, if I could have BFA Prot Warrior with just Devastator and not ever having to spam Devastate in between, like, my globals, I'm good. Like, that is dream Prot Warrior for me, and I would happily be a Prot Warrior man.
Yeah, if they did the Thunderclap build, I imagine it would have to be either, like, nerf damage-wise, or if there were, I don't remember if there were, like, Azurite trait synergies that really busted it. I don't recall.
There were.
Yeah, like, those Azurite traits. Yeah, those Azurite traits can't come back, if that's the case. If they bring the playstyle back, then those Azurite traits can't come back. If they don't bring the playstyle back, you can bring the Azurite traits back. I think it has to be one or the other to keep it balanced. But yeah, those are the two big things for me for Prot Warriors, Devastator and a Thunderclap build. I would also like to see the wall be a talent.
Yeah, the wall is good.
So, what else for you for Prot Warrior? You mentioned Devastator. What else are you thinking? No reprisal, which I agree with. Nothing else for Prot Warrior that you can think of?
No, not that I can think of. Like, I could probably see things like Spear of Bastion probably be in a class tree.
I absolutely agree with that.
I love Spear of Bastion. I mean, Banner's cool and all with the rage gen and buffing your party members and all of that, and having the playstyle of trying to keep it up, right? Like, it kind of feels like a lesser Dancing Rune weapon, but Spear of Bastion is just, you place that and it's good for kiting, it's good for aggro, it's good for rage generation.
Yeah, just good damage too. Honestly, like, Warrior might be one of the only classes where if Blizzard decided, hey, we're gonna put all 4 Covenant abilities somewhere in all these trees, I'd be like, okay. Like, I could see it. Like, that's the one class I think where I could see that playing out at. So yeah, Spear of Bastion I think is a good shout out. All right, and let's round up with Monk. Obviously, the tanks you and I probably know the most about. Your desires for Monk in Dragonflight. What do you want to see? Like, we had a bunch of data mine stuff, so I think we know some things that are probably going to be in there, but what else are you looking for?
Obviously we need Storm Stouts for double cake smash.
Agreed.
I'm a big fan of the Keg of the Heavens. Like, even if they nerf like the amount of max HP you're getting, just the healing component of it, I want it to stay because it gives Monk the self-sustain that they've been missing. Yep. I'm okay with the way like shuffle works. Mm-hmm. I don't miss Ironskin Brew at all. I don't want them to come back. So like having like honestly, like right now, like this is the best that Brewmaster has felt to me. I like this more because I did play it in 8.8.2 and it was like the way that stamina scaling was broken and causing you to generate orbs was busted. Yes, I know, but
those days. I'm mad. I'm sad I missed those.
Yeah, it was Brewmaster was insane in season 3 of BFA just because it was the only tank in the game that was able to mitigate the melee attacks from the Emissary Tides because they were magic melees. So like Prot Warrior couldn't shield block the melee attacks from that Emissary, and Brewmaster would just stagger it. GK obviously you could like AMS it, but like that it was good for like maybe 2 hits.
Also DK, and then BFA in general outside of the first season was not good.
Dog water, yeah.
Yeah, I think for Monk, I think in the data mining stuff, Storm Stouts and Keg of the Heavens are both there. I imagine Keg of the Heavens probably sees a little bit of a nerf from 66% to probably something like 50%, which I mean that's fine. I don't think that's
I'm okay with that.
Especially if it's a talent. Like I don't think it needs to be as powerful as the tier set bonus was, or is rather. I would like to see something new for Brewmaster, because like right now, like the talent build hasn't changed in like 5 years. You know, okay, you might switch out like Tiger's Lust for Cheese Torpedo depending on your preference, Dampen versus Bob and Weave, but that's it. Like, you've been playing the same talent build forever, and you know, while I think talents like Spitfire not being tied and competing with other talents might make it a potential choice, I want something either old returning, you know, from when I was absent from the game, so I can't speak to specifically what, but I just want something new for Brewmaster, because outside of Celestial Brew, they haven't really gotten anything new since I've come back in BFA.
I just don't want high tolerance competing with hit combo.
With blackout combo?
Yeah, sorry. It used to be called hit combo, so...
Yeah, you said hit combo, and I was like, wait, Windwalker? Sorry. That's just my newness to Monk. I blackout combo is interesting because I think it has potential, but it's always just competed with high tolerance, therefore it's a non-starter. So yeah, I'd be curious to see what they could do with it, with blackout combo. I am a fan of Scalding Brew Conduit being baked into the talent tree somewhere.
Yep, I'm good with that one.
I like that one, and I would like to see the leg sweep conduit either baked into leg sweep or be an option in the Monk tree, where they do reduce damage to you after you leg sweep, or reduce damage to everyone after you leg sweep. And it's just like really neat Mythic Plus utility that
Agreed.
Not a lot of specs can bring. Like granted, they have to actually be leg swept, so like on the most dangerous mobs, it's not gonna work, but like you get a big group, say like an Arden Wheel pull, and you just leg sweep everyone, and all of a sudden after the leg sweep ends for the next 6 seconds, it's, you know, I think it's not a big amount. I think it's only like 15% damage or something. Yeah, it's like 8 or
it's
10.
Like 8%.
Yeah, it's not big.
8% DR.
But still, I mean, that's 8% DR spread out over 5 people. So effectively, it's a combined 40% DR for 6 seconds after you leg sweep. Like, I just think that that's really interesting party utility that is fairly unique. So I'd love to see that conduit go back in, and Walk with the Ox, I think, needs to be baseline into Nijao, which reduces the cooldown of Nijao by like 0.5 seconds whenever you, I think it's whenever you kick smash. I don't have WoW up in front of me, so I can't check, but and make Clash work. That spell does not work for me.
Oh.
Like I watched
Clashes.
Bort use it, and I was like, "Wait, you actually used Clash and it worked?" He was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "It never works for me."
I mean, how many keys on that Sanguine week did you see me Clash and then it just snapped back into the Sanguine?
At least 3 times. I remember having to heal that, and I was like, "Please stop, get it off your bars." So.
Because like the problem is it actually like worked in like previous seasons, right? Like I used it a lot on Sanguine in like season 1 and season 2, but I don't know what changed, but they're snapping and it feels really bad.
Yeah. Well, the problem I have with Clash is that it's limited to only specific mobs in Mythic Plus. Like, it's not useful in Raid. You know, maybe on Trash, but no one cares about Raid Trash. You know, and like only probably like 50% of the mobs in Mythic Plus will it actually work on. So it's like, it's so niche. And like, yeah, like a good player will know how to use the movement to stop a spell cast or to stun a mob or whatever the case may be, but like, it just feels like it doesn't fit anymore. Like, it probably fit, you know, really well in Legion, but like, ever since they brought it back, it just doesn't feel like it functions in the way that it should be intended.
Yeah, it's very clunky.
I'd also like to see maybe an offensive cooldown for Brewmaster. Because you have Najal, but it's not really an offensive cooldown. So something...
It's also based on like Najal like absolutely cranks on fights like Rygalon and Sludge Fist, like where you have like a lot of incoming stagger. But the issue you run into is like it doesn't necessarily always light up well in Mythic Plus, where like you want to use it on cooldown because you want to use it, but like, you know, okay, like you might not need it for the DR at that point where like it's eating like your stagger damage, or you know, you might not be taking enough damage to like make your stomps like really strong.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, I see Najal as kind of like a weird combo of like offense and defense, because obviously it when you stagger damage, it's the one that eats some of the stagger that you're supposed to be taking on yourself, which is why it kind of just dies randomly in the middle of its duration. But the offensive aspect requires you to be like lax defensively to maximize the offense, and it doesn't feel great. So I'd like to see something else. I was gonna joke Fallen
Weapons
Order.
Of Order?
Weapons of Order, I think is okay. Having been an extensive Kyrian player this expansion, like it was the only Covenant I played for a long time. It's not super noticeable because this attack power scaling off the mastery isn't as significant as it is for like the dodge chance stuff. You know, but that's kind of true of all tanks. Most tanks that have attack power bonuses, Paladin and I think Warrior, both have attack power bonuses baked into their mastery. Like, the amount of mastery it is to get like 5 attack power is pretty significant, if I recall. So like, Weapons of Order wouldn't be there. Fallen Order came to my mind, except it doesn't summon Ox clones. It just summons the Windwalker and Mistweaver and like one Mistweaver clone. But it wouldn't. It would have to be like shorter than 3 minutes, otherwise it's just not good.
Yeah.
So a new offensive cooldown, just something that allows Brewmaster to get that little bit of extra oomph. It could even be like a single target focus cooldown. You know, obviously they don't hurt for damage overall, but in single target, I think they're not as good as people think they are, especially since you can't run Charred Passions anymore. Maybe that'd be the thing. Charred Passions makes its way into the tree as well. But
that would be cool.
Yeah, because Charred Passions had some interesting gameplay and gave you Breath of Fire uptime, which, at least with the current tier set bonus, is actually pretty significant. But you just can't have that uptime because everything in this tier bonus and with conduits and stuff, like everything pushed you into Keg Smash, so it kind of phased out any potential new legendaries to come into play. But Charred Passions, I know, was run for the first 2 raids of this expansion and was well liked for single target fights, so maybe it makes its way into the talent tree. I wouldn't hate being able to get 2 charges of Keg Smash and Charred Passions. I think that'd be an interesting damage build to roll with.
Yeah, because like you ran Charred Passions on like in farm, basically. Like you didn't ever run it in prog. I say Weapons of Order because like I notice like the burst potential that I have with it, because I'm one of the ones that I've played a lot of Necro Brewmaster just because of like it's not bursty, but it's very consistent damage. And Fleshcraft especially like earlier on before you had more self-sustain, was very powerful when you combined it. Like you'd be able to roll things like you could have Fleshcraft into Celestial Brew into Scale back into like another Celestial Brew once it came off cooldown. And so like you were just an absorb machine.
Yeah, even Marilith, when you get with Marilith, especially with his first capstone trait, I'll call it, the one where you heal when you Fleshcraft and then you heal afterwards. I used to use that all the time when it was up, like if you had to line of sight a boss. Like I played Necro, I guess it was last week, and I was just like, anytime we line of sighted on Jailer and I had Fleshcraft up, I was just Fleshcrafting just to heal myself and save the healers a little bit of mana. The thing about like Bone Dust Brew is that it was consistent, but so you could tell that you like, hey, I was doing damage, but the interactions for Brewmaster, I think were good, and I'd like to see maybe that interaction come back with the extra cooldown reduction. But like the damage of Bone Dust just was kind of just okay.
Lackluster.
Yeah, it was
like
kind
you
of
never had the big pop off moment like you do with Weapons of Order.
Yeah, Weapons of Order allows you a big pop off moment. Even if you get good resets, like Night Fae, like you just feel like you're popping off when you're just hitting Goomba Stomp every second or third cooldown on top of massive keg smashes and getting the defensive value of better stagger. Like, I was very anti Night Fae until I think it was you finally convinced me to give it a try in 9.2, and I was like almost immediately converted. I was like, God, this is fun. That's why I want to see Phalanx Stomp for at least Brewmaster and Windwalker. Mistweaver, I kind of understand why they don't want it. Like, most Mistweavers are like, we don't want any of these Covenant abilities because they were all kind of garbage and got propped up by Borrowed Power that won't be transferred over. But I'd like to see Phalanx Stomp for Brewmaster because I think and Windwalker too, because I prefer the Phalanx Stomp Windwalker gameplay of it. Again, different video, different conversation. But Phalanx Stomp Brewmaster, I think, was way better than I gave it credit for. It wasn't the best, but if you wanted to change up from Kyrian, it was kind of just simple, smashy fun. So, what else about Brewmaster? Anything else that you can think of for that kind of, I think, for you and I, it's probably our favorite, one of our favorite. I know it's my favorite. I think it's up there for you. Is your favorite tank?
Yeah, if I wasn't playing buff bot, it would be one of the ones I'm considering maining for the patch.
Double Brewmaster
probably
Monk. It'll be like BFA all over again.
Yep. I mean, I think it's very strong. It's a lot more damage than Vengeance is right now in Raid.
Yeah. Well, it's not too late for you to play Brewmaster and me to play Bear Druid in Season 4. I'll hate myself for it, but I would do that if it meant you had fun one week. All right, so let's wrap this up. I meant for this to be 90 minutes. We've gone like 2.5 hours. I'm not upset about that, but I know it's past midnight for you already at this point. So, let's. I know I'm obviously bigger on content creation than anyone else is, than you are. Obviously, I got the YouTube channel. I have my Twitch stream. I know you've been streaming Alpha. Where can folks find you if they want to watch you stream Alpha? Oh, I just lost Brewseph. Oh no. All right, well, you're gonna keep me talking. All right, folks. So while Brewseph is coming back because he just got a PC lockup, I'll go ahead and just plug all my stuff here. So, of course, you can find me on this Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Warrax_BAA. My streams haven't been as consistent as I would have liked to have been. I've been trying to do a lot of video content creation over the past few months because I've just been really into making videos. So my streams haven't been significant. Mostly been streaming Raid on Wednesdays, but I'll try to stream Monday nights as well because that's Mythic Plus night. You get to see me do a bunch of different keys. For Season 4, I'll be playing a ton of Monk. I'll be doing Brewmaster, I'll be doing Windwalker, and Mistweaver as well. My goal for Season 4 is to basically only play Monk until I get KSM on all 3 specs. That's Brewmaster logging off his Discord as he's rebooting his computer. And then for Once I achieve that, if I achieve it fairly quick into the season, welcome back, bro. I cannot hear you if you're trying to talk. Yeah, sorry about that. While he's figuring out his technical side. Yeah, so my goal for Season 4 is to KSM on all 3 Monk specs, and then after that I'll probably play Paladin, since it's kind of like right next to Monk is the driver's seat for that. This stream, I know I think I lost the stream in the middle of our conversation, so I'll probably just try to piece it all together and fill gaps as needed. But I will be putting this up on YouTube, so if you missed a part of the conversation for any reason, you'll be able to watch it on YouTube. That'll probably go up sometime this weekend, as I have time. And then, of course, you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at Warrax_WoW on there, because for some reason Warrax_BAA is taken. At least last I checked it was. But we'll see. Brew is still muted in Discord, so I think he's trying to get some stuff figured out. And I didn't mute him.
Ah, I can hear again.
Ah, there we go. So I was just about to ask you to plug your stream where you've been streaming alpha at, but then I lost you, and so I plugged all my shit. So now it's your turn. So if people want to see you stream alpha, where can they find you?
They can find me at twitch.tv/Brewseph TV. You can also find me on Twitter at Brewseph WoW.
Yeah. So I'll put all his stuff in the description for the YouTube video that I'll be doing sometime this weekend. So that'll be there for those folks interested in following him. He does have a sub button. I don't, so go pay him money and then follow me so I can get a sub button. That'd be great. Dude, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, this was a blast. It feels good to have someone to shoot the shit with about tank stuff.
Yeah, once the last 3 tanks are released, let's double back and let's do this again for those 3 specs, and obviously we'll hit any major changes that happen with these 3. But no, this was a blast. It's the first time I've ever done something like in this format for me, so this was something new for me, and it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I want to get back to doing content like in this format again very soon, hopefully. So,
well, maybe
it's a good experience.
Maybe you and I can find more opportunities to do this. Maybe not on a Thursday night. Maybe we can find another day that probably works for us better. But I just had limited time this weekend. I knew that was going to be the case because my wife is out of town, so I have my child all weekend.
Understood.
Just me. But yeah, no, dude, we can hit up other stuff. I know both of us have played some DPS specs. Like I know we both probably talk a ton about DK, and so we can maybe hit that up another time. And if anyone else from our community is interested, maybe we drag their butts in and see what they think about like their favorite classes and stuff.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to bring like Chonk in for Shaman, Fenny for Resto. Obviously, when we get Monk Trees, we're bringing in Narwhal.
Oh yeah, he is. Narwhal is the Windwalker specialist of our community. I know a lot about the spec, but he knows way more about Windwalker than I do. I definitely specialize in Brewmaster, and I'm probably one of the most experienced Mistweavers, and I've played it like all of 3 weeks this patch, just because there's not a lot of Mistweaver out there. But yeah, we'll definitely bring him in. I know that like with Mage Trees, I'm afraid to bring Justin and Kitchen in if that were the case, because they already spanned the spoilers channel for like 5 hours.
That conversation would never end. That's an infinite feedback loop.
Yeah, I would have to do like hey,
the referee.
Yeah, I would not be host. I'd be referee for sure. Like, hey, talk about mages. All right, where do you want us to start? Class tree. All right, go. And all the time people are, all right, we've talked for 3 hours. Let's move on to Frost Mage now. But yeah, I definitely would love to do this with more folks from the community if they're interested. Obviously, I'm not going to force anyone to do anything, but yeah, let's go back and do this when we get DH Monk and Warrior trees so we can play around with those and see what we get out of that.
Yeah, that'll be really fun. I'm very excited to start taking DK into alpha dungeons because I feel like it has a lot of potential. And I guess I'm gonna have to learn Guardian so I can learn Disco Bear.
Guardian, I think, is gonna be easier than you think to pick up at the very least. It's just gonna be a matter of like the little things, like if you take the build that I did with like Tooth and Claw, like obviously no add-ons right now on alpha, but I imagine like Tooth and Claw is going to be something you'll need a weak Aura for, so when your Maul's empowered, so you can get the damage and the DR and stuff like that. Like, it's going to be a real interesting spec, and I think the only thing that puts Druid in like 3rd place for me in terms of what I'm considering right now maining is not because of anything with Guardian, it's actually Feral. Because whatever I main, I want to play all 3 specs on, and I like doing multi-role stuff, but like Feral is just not good right now. And
it's so sad.
I know.
It's in such a bad spot.
I know. I did a whole video on the tree on it. I posted in the creator channel, but anyone watching that wants to know my thoughts on Feral Druid, I did a video on it. Let's just say I had less than stellar things to say about it. But if they can make some fixes to Feral Druid, and if Bear is good, and if Resto Druid's kind of the same as it is now, then I might be Druid again for the first time since like patch 8.1 when I main Druid for that patch, and then switched to TK for 8.2, and then switched to Monk for 8.3. So, anyway, guys, we'll go ahead and wrap that up here. So for those of you watching on the Twitch stream, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all having fun. I hope you keep on gaming. We'll see you next time.